The story began on a sunny day when the protagonist was surprised to see two suns shining brightly in the blue sky. The strange sight became familiar after 10 days, and he found it mysterious how adaptable humans could be. When he was thrown into that world in his pajamas, he had wondered how he would manage to cope, but somehow he did. He even admitted that he wanted to applaud his own ability to adjust. Ayah came by, calling Tasuku and asking him to go hunting since she had never stockpiled so much food before. She had a tail and even cat ears. Tasuku replied that he didn't want to be chased by a wild roar again. Ayah responded, wondering if he was referring to that small mishap the other day, and mentioned that he didn't get to see big game like that every day. Just then, another girl dressed in rather revealing clothes arrived, saying that she was glad they were finally there. She showed a victory sign and said she had just come up with a new design and thought they might want to try it on. Ayah told Belle that if it was going to be one of those outrageous outfits like last time, she would refuse to wear it. Belle teasingly called Ayah so-called. Then, a third girl came running toward them, calling out to Tasuku. Catching her breath, she asked if he was going to the forest again. Tasuku agreed and asked what was wrong. She got excited and requested that he gather some nuts for her, as she wanted to mix them into her bread, and also bring some spices if possible. Belle commented that the design of her clothes was vivid and full of emotion, and there was nothing wrong with it. Ayah wondered what she was even talking about, knowing she probably wouldn't understand her reasoning anyway. Tasuku thought that his life had become surprisingly bustling. What had started as a one-man survival game had turned into something so lively in just 10 days. Still, he couldn't help but wonder how he had ended up in that strange world. He recalled that his name was Kiki Tasuku, a 30-year-old single man who worked at a black company known for its long hours and low pay. He had been an average office worker, living a stressful daily routine that he eased through games and cooking. That particular weekend had begun under a gloomy, rain-laden sky, yet his heart had been bright as ever. He had been happy to go home without doing overtime, and on that Friday, when he could finally leave on time, he had wondered what other miracle could compare. He had stocked up on food for a quiet weekend of hibernation, planning to relax at home, jump into the lab, and maybe whip up some snacks while watching gameplay the next day. The lab was an online game released around 10 years earlier, a life-building simulation where players explored a vast virtual world, gathered materials, and crafted buildings and tools. It was an open-world game where one could create their own living environment, and Tasuku had been completely hooked on it as a working adult. Finding time to play had been difficult, so when he finally came home early after long days of overtime, he had been thrilled. Days like that were rare. He had prepared his food and cushions, planning to spend a cozy Friday night and make the most of his weekend. It was going to be perfect. But just as he picked up his console to play, the light suddenly went out. He had wondered what was going on, checked the breaker, and found no problem. Looking out the window, he thought it might be due to the lightning storm, though he couldn't help but feel frustrated that it happened just when he wanted to relax. His console might still run on battery, but without Wi-Fi, he couldn't play online. He had considered giving up, but unlike most, he hadn't stopped there. Realizing his phone connection still worked, he decided to tether it to get online and continue playing. He knew the communication cost might go up, but it would only be until the power returned. Ready to dive into the world of the lab, he suddenly found himself surrounded by a blinding white light. When he opened his eyes sometime later, he was lying in a vast grassy field. Looking around in confusion, he thought that at least he was still alive. But when he looked up at the sky, he was startled to see not one, but two suns shining brightly above him, a sight far different from the dimly lit room he had just been in. He wondered if the lightning shock had somehow caused this, and if this was what people meant by being teleported into another world. Thankfully, since he had read plenty of otherworldly light novels and manga, he managed to accept the situation without losing his composure. Considering where he was, he thought the most likely explanation was that he had been transported into the lab world just before the blackout. He reasoned that if all his game skills had carried over, then maybe he could use that data, and becoming a cheat-like character, as often seen in novels, might not be just a fantasy. He tried to test it by calling for his status to open, but nothing appeared. Feeling uncertain, he wondered if his voice was too quiet and kept shouting various commands for the skill or status display to appear, but nothing happened. After several failed attempts, he knelt down in disappointment, thinking it had all been too convenient to be real. Maybe he hadn't been transferred into the lab after all, but rather to an entirely different and unrelated world. Lying back on the grass, he wished it were only a dream, though it felt too real to be one. He soon realized he had ended up in a new world with nothing but his sleepwear and no apparent abilities. Still, he thought that if it really were the lab, he should be able to gather materials by hand. He decided to try and swung his hand over a patch of grass. Surprisingly, it was cleanly cut and turned into seeds right before his eyes. Startled, he began cutting more grass and plants, noticing that while some turned into seeds, others simply vanished, just like in the game. Encouraged, he went to a nearby tree and tried cutting it, imagining the motion of swinging an axe. To his amazement, his bare hand sliced through the trunk effortlessly, and it didn't even hurt. He successfully chopped down the tree, realizing that the material gathering system worked exactly like in the lab. Collecting the wood, rocks, and other resources, he concluded that the world he was in followed the same system as the game. Now he just needed to check if the other mechanics worked as well. After that, he touched the fallen tree and used the rebuild ability. Instantly, all the cut pieces of wood reshaped themselves into different forms. From this, he understood that rebuild was an ability used to process gathered items into usable materials. In the game, this function was meant to let players combine rebuilt materials to craft tools and other useful items. He then combined 2 logs, thinking that the 2 pieces of wood could merge into one seamless piece, and believed he could do the same. He wasn't sure if it was the lab world, but he thought that if he could use those 2 skills even in such an empty situation, he would be able to survive. Working for so long at a black company had exhausted him socially, and he had always dreamed of living a self-sufficient life amid rich nature. He decided to start his second life in the great outdoors and told himself to stay positive about it. Tasuku knew that he needed water and food to survive and had to start a fire. Since he had decided to live in that world, it meant he couldn't keep himself warm or cook his food easily. The most important thing, however, was to stay cautious of any danger that might come his way. He looked around, wondering where to build his house. As he observed the forest and mountains surrounding him, he gave a keener look and faintly spotted an ocean in the distance, though it seemed quite far. He realized it would make sense to set up a base in the forest where food and water were available, but without the skills to dodge threats or monsters, like in a game, it could easily be game over for him. So he decided to settle there. Before starting, he thought surviving in just that outfit and barefoot would be too harsh, so he decided to make some shoes. He touched the wood, mentioning reconstruction, and turned them into oddly angular shoes. Even though the fit was uncomfortable, he couldn't afford to be picky and was just grateful he wasn't hurt. He then moved forward to gather materials and started chopping. It felt strange to cut down trees with his bare hands, and it amazed him how real the experience felt. Just like in the game, he wondered how a tree could fall that way. Realizing he also needed stone materials, he considered breaking a nearby rock. As he touched it, he thought hitting a rock might hurt, but he still gave it a try. To his surprise, the rock split into 2 pieces even though it was solid. Using his rebuild skill, he turned the pieces into small bricks and found he could stack them easily. When he lifted one, he was surprised by how light it felt, realizing that reconstructed materials seemed weightless. With that, he thought building his shelter would be a breeze and decided it was time to gather more materials quickly. He kept searching and gathering materials. At that point, he had collected wood, resin, branches, and bark, and had even managed to find some fruits. However, he still didn't have enough wood to build his house, so he needed to go deeper into the forest. He didn't know whether that part of the forest had ever been touched by humans, but he was certain that a variety of creatures lived inside. He also had to find a water source soon. As he noticed the sun beginning to set, he realized he had to finish everything before it got too late. The first thing he needed to do was prepare a fire for safety, since dangerous animals usually stayed away from flames. He decided to use an old medieval-style method to make the fire, something he had only ever done in games before. As a salaryman, he had never imagined he would actually use such primitive tools in real life. He kept rotating the stick inside the log, thinking that he was completely lost and even feeling as if his hands were about to peel. After some effort, he finally managed to produce sparks. Quickly, he placed some dry grass over them, careful not to extinguish the flame. Slowly, the fire caught, and he smiled in satisfaction, proud of his accomplishment. He couldn't believe how genuinely happy he felt for making fire with his own hands, and for the first time, he truly appreciated how convenient a gas stove was. But he couldn't afford to get lost in his thoughts for long. He surrounded the fire with stones to prevent it from spreading. If it caught, there would be nowhere to run. Acting quickly, he made a makeshift torch by coating a piece of wood with resin. With that done, it was finally time for him to head deeper into the forest. With the torch in hand, he stepped into the forest, realizing how real everything felt. It was much darker than he had expected, and he was glad he had brought the torch with him. He decided to cut wood near the grassland instead of going too deep inside. Just then, he discovered a lake and wondered if it was a stroke of luck. The water was crystal clear, almost like pure spring water. It looked like a lifesaver. His throat was dry, and he wanted to drink immediately, but he hesitated, thinking that drinking raw water could be dangerous. He decided to make a bucket later so he could collect and boil the water before drinking it. By nightfall, he had prepared buckets for fetching water and gathered enough logs. The processed materials felt almost weightless to him, which made transporting them much easier. As the sun set, he remembered that if this world worked like the games he knew, monsters would appear at night. He hurried to rebuild everything quickly and finally managed to construct a solid shelter, completely enclosed with a single door. As he rested inside, he thought about how he wished he could have built a better house. In the world of the lab, a basic square hut with just a door was called a tofu house by beginners. It felt a little sad that even after a decade of experience, he had ended up building the exact same thing. Still, thanks to his building skills, the seams between the wooden panels were neatly hidden, which only added to the tofu look, plain, simple, and square. Even though the house was simple, the door had a sturdy bar to keep intruders out. The floorboards he had laid down worked perfectly to counter the effects of radiative cooling, and he had even made small air vents near the top for ventilation. For a first attempt at building a house, it turned out quite decent, and if he ever found it inconvenient, he could easily remodel it later. He decided to have a meal with the boiled water and the fruits he had gathered. Looking at one of the fruits, he thought its shape resembled a mandarin, but its red color reminded him of an apple. He wondered if it was even edible. He took a cautious bite, and to his surprise, it tasted just like an apple. Amused, he decided to name it Mingo. He found the food tasty, but realized he needed proteins and fats to survive. When morning came, he planned to go to the sea to catch some seafood. He thought about living a good life in that world and wondered if there were other players in the same situation. He also remembered the brown seeds he had gotten while cutting weeds. In the game, such seeds were usually planted to yield wheat in 3 days, but these didn't look like wheat seeds, so he wondered what they could be. Still, he decided to create a field and see what would grow, thinking that if it turned out to be food, it could become a game changer. There were countless things to do, yet he didn't feel uneasy. Instead, he felt truly alive. The next morning, when he woke up, his waist and back hurt badly, and he understood that sleeping on the floor without a mattress would leave him sore. It was his second day in that world, and as he stepped outside, he wondered how everyone else was doing. Physically and mentally drained from the previous day, he had fallen asleep without dreaming, expecting to wake up back in the real world. But since that didn't happen, he concluded that he was stuck there. The day seemed pleasant again, so he decided to go to the sea to look for seafood and seawater. Judging by the direction where the two suns had set the previous day, he figured the north led to the forest with a river and the south led to the ocean. He started heading toward the ocean, thinking that the sun should rise in the east and set in the west. He wanted to believe in the laws of the universe, but the presence of two suns made him doubt everything. As he walked endlessly, he wondered how far the flat land would stretch. When he encountered a large patch of tall weeds, he began cutting them using only his bucket, and soon realized that he could still gather materials with tools without losing their effectiveness. That meant he no longer had to strike wood or rock directly with his bare hands. Each time he did so, it gave him a strange thrill. but he also understood that if his abilities suddenly stopped working, he could seriously injure himself by slamming his hand against a rock. He decided it was time to make some proper tools. Eventually, he reached the ocean and remarked that the white sandy beach and the clear, beautiful sea looked just like a resort. The area was surrounded by steep cliffs, which made him wonder if it was a cove. His first priority was to find food and catch some fish, but he didn't have a fishing rod. He thought about finding some shells instead, and when he put his hand into the ocean, he discovered something that reminded him of a surf clam. Thick, rock-like, and seemingly delicious. While exploring further, he sensed something nearby, went to check, and found a cast iron pot, which confirmed that there were traces of civilization and people in that world too. Tasuku was filling the water bucket, and as he carried it back, he felt extremely tired and sluggish, having been stuck at his desk for what seemed like ages. He realized there was little he could do about it. He decided not to take the water home immediately, thinking about the cast iron pot, the seawater, and the treasure trove of clams he had found. The discoveries were exciting, but bringing them back would be a hassle, and he knew he needed to toughen up to survive. He concluded that he should let the clams expel their sand for a while and just heat the seawater so that the salt would appear once it evaporated. Next, he considered the tools he would need: a hoe for the garden, an axe for chopping, and a shovel and pickaxe. He resolved to make 4 of them first. He decided to sharpen a stone brick and then combine it with wood, eventually managing to craft all 4 tools. He thought that now he would no longer have to strike rocks and trees with his bare hands. Tasuku then planned to begin the food procurement mission and considered setting up a garden nearby. Although he had not gardened since elementary school, he recalled some knowledge from watching The Iron Chef. He started hitting the ground with a tool and was pleased to find that the soil tilled almost instantly. He continued until the task was finished. He had gathered several types of seeds, but decided to start with the round seeds, uncertain what would grow from them. He worried that if weeds sprouted, it could cause trouble. For now, he could only hope that something edible would grow. After planting, he watered the seeds and realized he would need to fetch more water. He reflected on how challenging surviving in this world would be. His first priority was to fill his belly and hope that the clams were ready. That night, he slept, and the next morning he woke up trying to start the day in a good mood for the adventure, but his back and hips were still aching. This made him realize that he really needed to create a bed, or at least a mattress, soon. However, he had a more pressing concern in mind. He needed to make a bath and a toilet. He wanted to soak in a hot bath to wash off his sweat, and if he could heat the bath, he could also use the leftover water for laundry. Above all, he recognized that he needed a relaxing space for his mental health. For hygiene, a toilet was essential. Going outside was extremely uncomfortable, so he wanted a private toilet. He also decided to use the soft leaves around him as toilet paper and planned to gather more. He knew his first priority was to secure materials and supplies according to these needs. As he looked over the field, he noticed that the roots and seeds he had planted had grown considerably. It seemed the crops could be harvested within 3 days inside the lab. There appeared to be no weeds, and he hoped that the food would be safe to eat. As he went to fill the water, he noticed a cat in front of him. It was incredibly cute, and he realized how much of a cat lover he truly was. In his old world, pets were not allowed, but in this new world, that did not matter. Having a cat around would ease his loneliness and add some joy to his life, and he genuinely wanted to live with it. However, the cat suddenly disappeared. He did not expect a stray to warm up to him immediately, but just seeing it had been exciting, and he hoped to encounter it again as he returned to his work. While working, he realized that even in daylight, the dim forest made fetching water a real struggle. As he cut through the woods, he cleared a path to the water source. The logs and stones he had harvested were collected for materials, and he continued building the path until he had gathered a substantial amount. With these materials, he would be able to construct both a bath and a toilet. He decided to start with the toilet, but wondered where it should be built. The smell inside the house was unbearable, and it was too far to make trips outside easily, so he chose a location at some distance to dig. He noticed that the soil changed in texture as he dug, similar to what happened in a game he had played. Some of the soil could be carried in its original form, but with a bit of effort, it crumbled. He started digging and, within a short while, managed to dig up to 5 meters. He used wood to make a seat for the toilet and enclosed it with walls, adding a door as well. The next task was the bath, and since it required fire, he decided to build it away from the house, in the opposite direction of the toilet. A water heater would have been convenient, but that was just a fantasy, so he chose to follow the traditional method. The Goemon-style bath he had seen in books was usually round, but he planned to give it a twist by making it designed for stretching out and relaxing. He eventually completed the bath, a spacious rectangular one built with wood along the edges and stones at the bottom, including a drain. He then set firewood outside to heat the stones and boil the water. After that, he carefully lowered the wooden base to avoid getting burned and prepared to step inside. However, he began to wonder what had gone wrong with his supposedly perfect plan. He continued working and discovered that the water wasn't filling up at all. He realized that making the bath large had increased its water capacity, and if it had been a small round one, there wouldn't have been a problem. But since it was already late, he decided to make several trips to fetch water, as the water source was close enough. While carrying the water, he started sweating, which made him wash his clothes first, so that by the time he finished bathing, they would dry completely. He thought he might as well light the stove fire too, since it would take a long time for the water to boil. Though he found it embarrassing to run around fetching water in just his underwear, he felt relieved that no one was there to see him. After making more than 100 trips between the water source and the bath, the tub was finally filled by evening. He then took a bath and felt completely relaxed. Through this bath, he realized that the water had truly been worth all the effort of building. The square window opened to a view of the distant sea, where the orange sky contrasted beautifully with the deep blue water. Although the bath's design had a few flaws, everything turned out well in the end. However, the exhausting labor of carrying all that water had been a real struggle. He deeply appreciated the civilization from his original world, and wondered if there were others like him who had been transported from their own worlds into this game world. Despite the presence of driftwood along the shore, it didn't seem like anyone lived nearby. Still, he questioned whether there was any way to return if he truly had been transferred here, and thought that the only possibility might be to clear the game. In the online version, the lab staff credits appeared only under certain conditions, but there was never really a concept of clearing the game. Because of that, a version update for space exploration had been scheduled soon, and he wished he could have played it. Even so, being able to construct and rebuild things in this world was enjoyable, and though securing food and renovating the makeshift house were still major challenges, he found the process satisfying. Compared to the life he had led just a few days earlier, buried in endless work, he now felt truly alive. Rebuilding his life in this world didn't seem like such a bad idea after all. Yet, as he soaked in the bath, lost in his thoughts, reality was already preparing to prove him wrong. He came out the next morning, and it seemed that he was in a good mood. He had taken a bath for the first time in ages and had slept peacefully, which made him feel refreshed. However, his back and waist still ached as usual. There was a tool he had been eager to craft, but he thought he should first check the fields to make sure everything was safe. As he approached the field, he noticed the cat nearby. He thought that cats were naturally cautious, so if he moved too quickly, it would run away. That was why he needed to hold himself back for the moment. The calico cat was still keeping its distance, so he decided to take his time and make sure it understood that he meant no harm. He kept smiling there for a while and then went to check the crops. He found that they were wheat, though still not mature enough for harvest. Just like in the game, he decided to wait until a day before they were ready to harvest. After that, he planned to make a fish trap similar to the one he had once built in science class using a plastic bottle. He had gathered stones, wood, and bark, fortunately all the materials he needed, and believed he could create something similar. While he was working, the cat came closer to him. He wanted to pet it but didn't want to scare it away. Trying to stay calm, he thought he might work outside instead of inside so he could enjoy the cat's company. First, he needed to process the bark. As he worked, he thought about how the fibers in the bark could be turned into threads or ropes once processed. He would love to make some beading with it later, but for now, food was his priority. After that, he started using the wood and focused his power to create a cylindrical container with an open-ended cone on top, then combined them. Finally, he tied it all together with the rope, completing the trap. He thought of putting the bait inside the container and letting it sink into the water. The fish, lured by the bait, would swim in through the cone and be unable to escape. It was a simple trap, but he hoped it would work even in this other world. He noticed that the cat had come very close to him. Feeling flustered, he slowly reached out his hand to pat its back and was relieved to see that it didn't run away or seem annoyed. He continued petting it happily, feeling genuine warmth. The cat also appeared to enjoy it, and he realized that even cats in this world were just as adorable. He thought that if he managed to catch some fish, he would share them with the cat as well. He told himself to get ready because he couldn't wait to see the cat enjoy its meal. Gathering his energy, he focused on making traps to catch fish for the little feline. He managed to prepare 6 traps and then headed straight toward the ocean. The cat followed him closely, and now that they had become good friends, he felt that being alone was no problem at all. He grew excited, wondering what kind of fish he would catch. He didn't immediately throw the traps into the ocean. Instead, he took out some meat from a clam and placed it inside, thinking that since he enjoyed it as a human, the fish would probably find it delicious too. After that, he tied all the traps securely to a nearby piece of driftwood to prevent them from being swept away and decided to return the next day to check on them. Unfortunately, there was no treasure waiting for him, but he did find some shells, including one resembling a honbinosugai clam, along with a few beautiful purple mussels. Packing up, he looked at the cat and suggested they have a feast once they got home. The cat responded in its own way, as if agreeing. He wondered if it actually understood his words, but even if it didn't, having someone to talk to brought him comfort. With a feline companion beside him, even the longest journeys didn't feel lonely. When he returned, he decided to let the clams soak in the sand for the time being. He asked the cat if it could imagine eating shellfish, but reminded himself that too much salt wouldn't be good for it. The only food left was some mango, but there wasn't much for the cat to eat. Suddenly, the cat vanished from sight, and then he heard a voice telling him not to overthink it, just to share his meal with that little furball. Feeling confused, Tasuku turned around and saw a girl with cat ears and a tail. She told him not to worry about the saltiness and to make the food flavorful, explaining that she wasn't fond of delicate tastes. He should season it boldly. Shocked, Tasuku stared at her face, and she tilted her head, asking if there was something on it. He couldn't help but wonder if the calico cat from earlier had somehow transformed into a human. The thought was unbelievable. She stepped closer, teasingly asking if her beautiful beast form had left him speechless. With a confident smile, she added that for a young man like him, she might be a bit too much to handle, and that in his world, there probably weren't many women as stunning as her. Startled and at a loss for words, Tasuku finally managed to ask if she had just mentioned another world. She nodded, asking if he wasn't from a different one. He was taken aback and wondered how she even knew about that. Then, flustered, he asked if she could at least put on some clothes before continuing their conversation. She laughed lightly, saying he seemed easily embarrassed over something as simple as clothing. A moment later, she reached up toward a glowing portal in the sky and pulled out a giant bag, telling him to relax. It was just the two of them there. She began taking out her clothes and casually mentioned that she didn't care much about what others might think. Blushing, Tasuku turned his face away and said that meeting someone for the first time like that wasn't exactly normal. As she dressed, she smirked and asked if he had already forgotten that the person fetching water the previous day was wearing nothing but his underwear. His eyes widened in surprise as he wondered if she had seen him back then. He had been sure no one was around. She explained that she had been in her cat form and had come from the forest, so seeing him wasn't difficult at all. Once dressed, she looked at him with a smile and introduced herself as Ayah, a member of the cat folk. Feeling confused, Tasuku turned around and saw a girl with cat ears and a tail. Tasuku felt confused, and Ayah explained that he had seen her in her beast form the previous day without flinching. He wondered why he would need to run from a cat. She revealed that the patterns on her body were considered symbols of a curse, despised not only by the cat folk, but also by humans. Tasuku was astonished and asked if calico cats were everywhere. She replied that while that might be true in his world, in the world they were currently in, she was the only calico cat. He was shocked, Ayah continued, saying she wasn't joking. The markings on her stomach were ancient symbols of destruction. Among the catfolk, calicos were feared as cursed children who brought misfortune to their kin. If such a child was born, it would either be banished or killed. Her parents had chosen to banish her. Tasuku found this revelation horrifying. Ayah reassured him that he didn't need to worry, as it was all in the past. In the humans' world, calicos were even seen as symbols of revolution. Tasuku was skeptical, but she smiled and told him that no one in that world would dismiss a calico like her as cute. She also noted that he seemed new to the world and asked if he had any plans. Tasuku admitted he had only just arrived and was still figuring things out, experimenting to see how everything worked. Ayah then said she knew the world well and decided to stay with him. As he began to respond, she turned toward him and asked if he had a problem with that. Tasuku appreciated the gesture, but he noted that living together could be troublesome. The house was small, and it would be awkward for a man and woman to live together. She teased that he might lose control seeing a beautiful girl in front of him, reminding him that he had stared at her bare body earlier. Tasuku insisted he hadn't. She told him to calm down, claiming she knew he didn't have the courage for anything inappropriate, and reminded him that he had previously said he wanted to live together. Was that a lie? He replied that it wasn't a lie, but that statement had been meant for the cat. She smiled and said there wouldn't be any issue now as she entered. Tasuku quickly asked her to wait, insisting that the decision hadn't been finalized yet, and pleaded with her not to remove her clothes. The next day, he got up without proper sleep and went to the sea to check the traps. Ayah was yawning behind him, looking half asleep, which made him wonder if the catfolk were nocturnal, like the cats from his old world. Ayah asked if they really had to wake up so early, saying that since Fizz, who was caught in the traps, hadn't escaped, Tasuku could have slept longer. Tasuku thought it was all her fault that he couldn't sleep well. He then recalled the previous night when he had been trying to sleep, but Ayah had asked if he was really sleeping like that. She had taken out a rug and requested to use it, saying it was better than lying directly on the floor. Tasuku appreciated it, but asked about her. She had replied that she preferred sleeping in a less restrictive way, and that it was warm enough inside with the cloths she already had, so she would sleep just like that. Tasuku had agreed and lain down to sleep. However, while sleeping, he had felt something soft, and, upon waking, found Ayah clinging to him without any clothes on. Startled, he had shouted loudly, waking her up. She had wondered why he had woken her up like that, while he had questioned why she was holding on to him while sleeping. Ayah had replied that the new environment hadn't helped her sleep much, and while searching for a comfortable spot, she had somehow ended up on his bed. Returning to the present, he thought that was the reason he couldn't get back to sleep after that incident, which had led them to collect the fish traps at the sea. They caught 4 fish, each about 20 centimeters long, which wasn't bad at all. He asked Ayah what those fish were called, and she replied that they were striped jackfish. Tasuku understood that they were quite different from the striped jackfish of his own world. He also learned that Mingo was actually called apple in that world. It looked similar but was completely different. Afterward, he returned home to craft a workbench and a knife, preparing to cook the fish. Since he was quite skilled at cooking, he began cutting the fish carefully. Ayah teasingly called him a novice, saying that a charming, bare-skinned lady had clung to him, so he should have enjoyed it and gone back to sleep. Tasuku replied that it had been more of a shock, and he asked if she really considered herself charming. She wondered what he meant by that, and whether he was implying that her body wasn't attractive enough. Tasuku, flustered, said that it wasn't true. Ayah then moved closer to him, saying that he was adorable. Tasuku looked confused, and as she turned away, Ayah told him that he didn't need to say anything. She could already tell from his expression. Tasuku mentioned that he was a 30-year-old man, so the word adorable didn't apply to him. Ayah was surprised to learn that he was 30 years old, and remarked that outlanders like him tended to look younger than their actual age. Tasuku, equally surprised, asked about her age. She shook her head and said that it was rude to ask a girl about her age. Tasuku thought that she looked like a high schooler, though her way of speaking was oddly old-fashioned, which puzzled him. After that, he finally went to cook the fish. While grilling it, he thought about harvesting some barley as well. When he reached the field, Ayah was already standing there in disbelief that the crops had fully grown in just 3 days. She explained that the round barley was considered a luxury item. which made Tasuku wonder if barley was really that valuable in that world. She explained that there were different kinds of barley, and the one commonly eaten was a variety called fine barley. It thrived even in harsh soil, unlike round barley, which only skilled farmers could cultivate. She added that refining fine barley left very little edible material, so people usually ground it with the husk and mixed it with the grains to bake bread. Tasuku wondered if that was similar to the black bread from his old world. Ayah said that bread made solely from round barley was considered food for nobles and the upper class. Tasuku then understood why it was so valuable, though he thought it was strange since the seeds he had used came from the weeds he had cut down. Ayah didn't believe him and told him to save the jokes for later. Zhao thought that he had simply used the same method as in the game, though he guessed it wasn't normal in that world. He used his hands to cut everything perfectly, which surprised Ayah. She remarked that the more she saw his ability, the more fascinating it became, and she wondered if all outsiders possessed such powers. Zhao agreed, saying that he hadn't met anyone else since arriving there, so he didn't really know. She then asked if he would mind coming with her for a while after they finished their work. Tasuku wondered what she meant by that. Ayah explained that since they had obtained round barley and were planning to bake bread, she thought they should prepare a fitting dish to go with it, which meant gathering some ingredients. As Tasuku began to guess what she was referring to, Ayah smiled and said that he really was quick to understand that they would be going hunting in the forest. As they entered the forest, Tasuku trembled at the thought of going ahead, while Ayah remained calm and told him to relax, assuring him that she wouldn't leave him behind. Tasuku said that even though she told him not to worry, those things still terrified him. Ayah reassured him again, saying that whether it was a bear or a giant snake, she could easily handle it. Tasuku wondered how she planned to fight since she didn't seem to have any kind of weapon. She revealed that she already had one. Curious, Tasuku wondered if it was some kind of magic. She replied that it wasn't magic at all and that it would be faster if she simply showed him. As she took position, Tasuku was unsure of what was happening. She told him to stay quiet and get down. A moment later, she moved her hands forward as if striking something and said that it was a wild rabbit. Tasuku wondered what she had just done. Without explaining, she told him to follow her, saying that he would understand soon enough. When they reached the spot, they found a rabbit lying dead, struck by a sharp spike she had thrown. It was of a good size, and Ayah said they should gratefully accept the bounty. Tasuku was amazed and asked if she had really done that. She revealed that she had always been skilled at throwing needles and had once made a living as a hunter. Tasuku admitted that it was truly impressive. Afterward, Ayah explained that to keep predators away, they should clean the prey far from the house, and even if any danger approached, she would take care of it. Tasuku found her words reassuring, though he still felt confused about how she could use something as small as a needle as a weapon, especially against large monsters. Just then, Ayah sensed something and told Tasuku to stay back, explaining that a large monster seemed to have caught the scent of blood. Tasuku, confused by what she meant, suddenly heard the frantic chirping of birds and grew frightened, wondering what was happening. Ayah said that it was coming, and moments later, they saw a boar charging toward them, startling Tasuku. It was a giant boar with two massive tusks that charged directly at them. Tasuku thought it was reckless, as the boar's strength and size were overwhelming. He realized they should run away, but then noticed that Ayah had already gone to fight the creature and had leapt high into the air. Tasuku found it insane and mentioned that the boar was too big for throwing needles to work. He saw her make several needles appear near her head. Instead of throwing them, she stabbed them first and then released them at such high speed that they tore through the boar's body. After defeating it, she finally jumped down. She explained that normally the boar wouldn't react so quickly, so it must have been hungry and nearby. Although it wasn't planned, they had managed to get meat and a hide from it, so no one should complain. Seeing Tasuku's frozen face, she questioned why he wouldn't fight courageously like her. He thought that if she had just extended her claws to kill it, the power would have been terrifying. He admitted to himself that he had never seen abilities like hers in any game he had ever played. It seemed that even his lab experience wouldn't be of much help in a world filled with mysteries beyond imagination. He decided that he would definitely stay away from the deeper parts of the forest. Ayah called out to him, asking him to stop zoning out and give her a hand. Tasuku wondered what kind of help she needed, and she replied by tying the boar with a rope, saying they were going to take it apart. Tasuku asked if they were really going to butcher it, and she explained that something of that size couldn't be processed alone. Tasuku, still surprised, said he had never butchered a boar before. She told him that it was no different from cutting a fish, but he kept insisting that it was completely different. She stated that experience was the key and urged him to hurry and finish it. He thought he might use his rebuild skill to break it down. As he approached, she encouraged him to try it. Tasuku said it was time to show how incredible his power was, then used rebuild and cut off the skin instantly. Ayah was surprised, remarking that even a seasoned hunter would struggle to skin something so cleanly, and admitted that it was truly impressive work. He wondered if it was only the hide and planned to separate the hide, meat, and organs neatly. However, he thought he might need to peel off the hide first before separating the rest. When he tried to use rebuild again, nothing happened, so he wondered if there was a limit to what he could rebuild. Ayah asked what was wrong with him and why he was standing there slack-jawed. Since the hide had already been peeled so perfectly, she said that processing the organs should now be easy. Tasuku wondered if he could leave that part to her, but she asked what nonsense he was talking about and told him that he needed to see the process through to the end. Leaving it unfinished, she said, would be like drifting straight to the grave. Tasuku mentioned that he was a bit exhausted, but Ayah ignored his complaint, saying she would show him how to do it. She told him to hold the knife as she did, and make a cut. As she taught him, he thought his memory of what he was doing felt strangely fuzzy, yet as instructed, he found himself butchering the boar. The 6th day in Tasuku's world began, and after the hunting and butchering of the previous day, he had been completely exhausted and gone to bed early. That morning, he woke up next to Ayah, just like before. Back by the ocean, the first thing he did was check the fish. Ayah sat nearby on the wooden floor and told him that he would get used to it eventually, asking him to trust her. Tasuku wondered if she realized how shocking it was for him to wake up beside a girl like that, thinking he would never get used to it. She mentioned that she was a beauty, to which he wondered why she couldn't at least sleep with her clothes on. She replied that being without clothes inside the house was more comfortable. Tasuku argued that it didn't mean she had to cling to him, but she said that staying by his side gave her warmth, so it was fine. He wondered if she was using him as a living heater. Suddenly, he noticed that she was much closer than before and was startled, asking her not to sneak up on him like that. She apologized, saying she hadn't meant to scare him. Tasuku then told her to collect the traps, but she stopped him, saying she wanted to tell him something first, that if he really couldn't get used to seeing her like that, he could always make a move on her. Tasuku was confused, and she added that once he got used to the feel of her skin, he would adjust to it, whether he liked it or not. Completely flustered, he heard her add that she wouldn't mind if it was him. He was left speechless, and then she laughed, admitting that she had only been joking and asking if she had scared him. Tasuku said it had been a cruel joke. Ayah moved ahead, apologizing and saying he was so cute that she couldn't stop herself from teasing him. Tasuku took a deep breath, thinking he really needed to act on the idea he had been considering. They were both heading back when Ayah wondered if Tasuku was thinking of expanding the house. He replied that, technically, it was just a rebuild, and that he had been considering it for a while. Ayah questioned whether they really needed more space, as it seemed sufficient for the two of them. Tasuku thought the house was practically overflowing with boar meat, and suggested that if they built a storage room, they could store food there as well. He also wanted to add a bedroom and a proper kitchen, so he considered it the perfect opportunity. Ayah mentioned that there would only be one bedroom. Tasuku asked what she meant, since they would each have separate rooms. Ayah felt annoyed, wondering if he disliked sleeping next to her that much. Tasuku explained that it wasn't that he hated sleeping beside her, but whenever he got up, she would end up waking as well, and she always looked so sleepy throughout the day. He asked if she wouldn't prefer to sleep in as much as she wanted. Ayah fell silent for a moment, considering that it might be true, and then wondered if having separate bedrooms meant Tasuku could sleep without worrying about her. She added that she didn't really mind waking up with him. Tasuku then mentioned that he needed to take care of another matter. He went to check the drying boar hides and said that if he could turn them into bedding, he could return the mat he had borrowed from her. He then apologized and asked what she had been saying earlier. Ayah said it was nothing and explained that she had just called him an idiot to hurry him inside the house, slamming the door behind her. Tasuku was still unsure if he had said something wrong. He suggested that they eat before starting to cook and added that since the house was cramped, it would be better to cook outside. As he grilled the fish, he noticed Ayah approaching and told her it would be done soon. She remarked that expanding the house might be unavoidable. Tasuku agreed, admitting that it was getting a bit tight. She then asked if there was anything else they should prioritize building. Tasuku considered it for a moment, and Ayah mentioned the idea of a well. Tasuku replied that a well would make dealing with water much easier. She agreed, and Tasuku added that once they finished expanding, they would definitely dig a well. Suddenly, Ayah seemed disappointed, and Tasuku reassured her, saying that she had really saved him. Thanks to her, they had meat and hides, and life felt more fulfilling. She told him not to flatter her unnecessarily, but Tasuku insisted he wasn't flattering her. He admitted that he had thought he could manage alone, but after the boar hunt the previous day, he realized he wouldn't have known what to do without her. Ayah responded with a cold reaction, and Tasuku commented that her hunting skills were truly incredible. Ayah felt proud and acknowledged that her skills were impressive. Tasuku continued, noting how effortlessly she moved through the dense forest. She replied that the forest wasn't difficult for her, and she knew exactly where everything was. Tasuku then asked if that included mushrooms and wild greens, and she confirmed, even offering to gather them if he wanted. Tasuku was pleased and mentioned that they needed more vegetables. Ayah, confident in her abilities, told him to leave it to her, promising to gather the bounty of mountain treasures that would surely amaze him. After that, they ate the fish, and Tasuku noticed that Ayah was in a very good mood. He thought that was what mattered most, though he still wondered why she had been so resistant to expanding the house. After some time, Ayah prepared to leave to gather plenty of materials for Tasuku. Tasuku agreed, counting on her to collect the wild greens as well. She then set off to gather everything, while Tasuku continued chopping wood for the expansion. After about 2 hours, Tasuku had collected a large pile of wood, and Ayah returned with the green vegetables and other items he needed. Tasuku suggested that they take a break, but Ayah pointed out that he had a visitor. Confused, Tasuku asked for clarification. Ayah explained that if her eyes were not deceiving her, it was the dark elf. A lady was standing nearby looking at the boar skins that Tasuku and Ayah had just placed there. Tasuku and Ayah were returning, and Tasuku was thinking about the guest, though he didn't know anyone in that world. According to Ayah, that guest was a dark elf, and she had read about them in fantasy novels. As they arrived, they found a girl near a boar's hide, and her outfit was extremely revealing. She said that she had a quick question for them. Tasuku asked Ayah if all dark elves in that world dressed like that. Ayah denied it, saying that although she had lived a long time, she had never seen an elf dressed in such a manner. The elf wondered if the animal hides had been hunted by them. Tasuku agreed, curious about her question. She asked if she could make it easier to explain and mentioned that she had a favor to request, whether they could spare her some of the hides. Ayah wondered if she really was a dark elf and why she would need the hides, questioning why she couldn't hunt them herself. Belle explained that it was a bit of a problem for her. Ayah said that if Belle didn't want to explain, they wouldn't force her to share the details. Belle hesitated, but eventually mentioned that they had insisted on knowing, and she had made them promise to keep her story a secret. Ayah noted that Belle wasn't really listening to them, while Tasuku remarked on how unique her voice was. After that, she shared her life story with both of them, and they had no choice but to listen quietly. They learned that she had once lived in a dark elf village hidden in the northern forests and mountains. The village was well off, and she had enjoyed a peaceful life. However, there was one thing she would never compromise on: her dream of working in fashion. Ayah wondered what that meant, and Tasuku explained that it was a profession involving clothing design. Belle said that she wanted to start her own brand and call it Belle Mark, though Tasuku suggested they might want to reconsider the name. Nevertheless, when she had brought up the idea in her village, everyone had rejected it, which had greatly frustrated her. It turned out that her village harvested cotton and stored all animal hides from hunts as communal property. Belle explained everything that had happened to her, shouting that the villagers were stubborn and close-minded. Like stereotypical old fogies, they refused to listen to her. She added that hunting large animals with high-quality hides was difficult to do alone. Ayah wondered if Belle only wanted the poor-quality hide to make clothing, and Belle confirmed that this was indeed her intention. Just then, Belle noticed Ayla's extremely pale skin, unusual even for catfolk, and her hair, which she found ridiculously gorgeous. When Ayla acknowledged it, Belle remarked that it was rare and admitted she was jealous of Ayla's pale complexion. Ayla explained that it was simply a superstition among the catfolk and humans. Belle then observed that the house looked tiny and boxy. Tasuku explained that they had only just settled there, so the house had been assembled in a rush. Belle seemed amused at the thought that Tasuku had already bagged a huge boar, finding it hilarious. Ayla then brought the conversation back to the matter at hand, suggesting that they could give the boar hide to Belle, but she expected something in return. Belle admitted that she had no money. Ayla, disappointed, remarked that in that case there would be no deal. Belle then mentioned that she would make them something as a thank you gift. They were curious about what she had in mind, and Belle insisted that it would be faster if she just showed them. She then took some crop waste and asked if she could use Tasuku's straw hat. Tasuku said he didn't mind. She asked them to watch carefully, and then, using her power, she transformed the straw into cloth, which startled Tasuku. He wondered if such magic even existed in that world. Ayla admitted she had never seen anything like it before. Tasuku recalled that he had tried to use his crafting ability to make a mat from straw, but he could only manage to make rope or cord. Considering he couldn't even reconstruct the boar, it seemed that his abilities were far from all-powerful. Belle simply asked what they thought of it. Tasuku wondered if all dark elves could perform such magic, but she denied it, explaining that it was her own original skill. She added that she had been sneaking around using the cotton and leather stored in her village, trying to make cloth before her grandfather noticed, and it was only recently that she had really mastered the technique. Tasuku touched the cloth, impressed by how soft and smooth the fibers were, and admitted he would never have guessed it had been made from straw. Belle explained that she could make other items in the same way. She then made a cotton bag appear from a storage in the sky, which startled Tasuku even more. As she demonstrated by creating a face towel, Tasuku became excited, wondering if he could make such things too. Belle replied that it was a very easy task for her, merely an application of the skill she had already shown. Ayla complimented Belle's craftsmanship, and Tasuku added that it was far better than the things Ayla had brought. Embarrassed, Belle told them to stop complimenting her, saying it made her feel awkward. Tasuku felt a little guilty when she snatched the hand towel from him, while Belle quietly muttered that no one had ever praised her that much before. Tasuku wondered if she had just said something, but Belle, flustered, quickly denied it. She then asked how long Tasuku had been living there. When Tasuku replied that it hadn't been very long, she asked if he was having any trouble getting clothes or personal items. Tasuku explained that he was planning to arrange everything soon. Belle agreed to take care of it herself, saying she would make everything he needed and that in return she only wanted his permission to stay there. Just then, Ayla shouted that it wasn't going to happen. She insisted that no matter how amazing Belle's magic was, living there was an entirely different matter. Belle responded with a teasing smile, saying there was no need for Ayla to be so defensive and that she had no intention of getting in the way between her and Tasuku. Flustered, Ayla asked what she was even talking about. Belle replied playfully that she was referring to those lewd things, and assured her she wouldn't make the first move, so Ayla could relax. Ayla, exasperated, said that if that was the case, then she was supposed to let Belle stay. Belle cheerfully said she was looking forward to working with them and extended her hand to Tasuku for a handshake. Tasuku accepted it, asking if she was really sure, since there was still so much to do and it might be inconvenient for her to live there. Belle replied that it wouldn't be a problem at all. In fact, it would be more fun to build things from scratch. Then she turned to Ayla, warning her not to touch them, or else they would make her regret it. Furious, Ayla shouted that this wasn't what they had agreed upon. Belle only laughed and said that it couldn't be helped now. She mentioned that since it was a special occasion, she would make the clothes herself and wanted to give both of them a present. After that, she began her work and left the others prepared inside the house. She then asked them to go and change their clothes. Tasuku felt happy but also guilty because he hadn't done anything to deserve such a gift. Ayla appreciated it as well but felt that she should give something in return. Belle told them not to worry, saying that their earlier compliments about her magic had made her very happy, and this was her way of getting along with them. When Tasuku put on the dress and came out, Belle found it as amazing as she had expected, though in reality, he looked like a clown, which made Ayah laugh a lot. She joked that no matter how vast the world was, no one else could wear such an outfit. Tasuku wondered if he had put on the wrong clothes, but Belle assured him it was the right outfit for him, and questioned why he was asking something like that. He thought that being skilled in magic didn't necessarily mean someone was good at designing clothes, since both were completely different talents. He then began to understand why the Dark Elf elders had opposed her idea. Seeing Ayah laugh, Tasuku asked if she thought she could keep laughing forever. Belle later made matching outfits for both of them. Ayah seemed worried, and Tasuku told her that there was an identical outfit waiting for her inside. Ayah immediately refused, saying she didn't want to change her clothes. Belle told her not to worry and said that Ayah would also look cute if she wore it. Ayah kept refusing, saying she had never agreed to be Belle's little sister. Belle mentioned that she was already 160 years old, and certainly older than both of them, but Ayah revealed that Belle was neither younger nor older than her. Tasuku was surprised to learn that both of them were over 100 years old. After a while, Ayah came out wearing the same funny dress, and Belle complimented her by saying that she looked really hot. By looking at Ayah, Tasuku also began to laugh, which made her shout and ask why he was laughing. She told him that she didn't want to hear anything like that. Belle mentioned that both of them looked amazing and added that she would be creating many exciting designs in the future, so they should look forward to them. After that, their lively household gained another member. With that in mind, Tasuku decided to start expanding the tofu house. He asked Belle to use less flashy designs and to focus on making more practical, everyday items. Ayah also helped with the expansion by gathering materials for Belle. Tasuku continued building with the materials he had collected, knowing they needed to hurry since the tofu house felt cramped with 3 people living inside. The materials enhanced by his ability felt weightless, almost as if he were building with toy blocks, and the wooden parts joined seamlessly, creating a flawless finish. Belle was amazed to see Tasuku's power and ability in action. Ayah mentioned that although Tasuku looked plain, he was actually someone from another world, and she wondered why they were bragging and calling him plain-looking when it was unnecessary. Belle said that she had never met a Gentile before, and that it felt incredible, making her feel extremely excited. Ayah then remarked that for Tasuku, building 1 or 2 houses wasn't a big deal. Hearing that, Tasuku relaxed a bit, realizing that the 2 of them were finally getting along. By the afternoon of their 7th day in the world, the expansion had finally been completed. Although the work usually took around 2 days, the sense of accomplishment from transferring their house was immense. He then thought about diving into the grand home makeover reveal. The house was a quiet wooden structure standing proudly amidst sprawling meadows, surrounded by lush forests, where the fresh breeze filled their lungs with nature's vitality. The entrance was on the south side, offering a distant view of the sea. Just beyond the door, a spacious and open living room welcomed them. On the west side of the living room, there was a door leading to the old tofu house, which had been transformed into a storage shed by the master's touch. Dried meat and grains were neatly arranged, making everything easy to find at a glance. Another room had been added adjacent to the shed on the north side. Finally, there was a fully equipped kitchen, complete with the Tasuku's favorite cooking tools proudly displayed. A hallway extended eastward from the living room, with bedrooms built on both sides. In addition, there were 2 more rooms to the north and south, bringing the total number of multi-purpose spaces to 4. Tasuku looked at the house and remarked that it not only ensured privacy, but that the dark elf-crafted beds and trinkets also added a personalized touch. Ayah wondered what he was mumbling to himself. Tasuku asked her not to ruin her mood, insisting that it was the best part. She found it rather creepy and questioned why there were 4 rooms, since it was just the 2 of them and Belle, the elf, so 3 should have been enough. Tasuku decided not to read too much into it, thinking that 3 rooms would only throw off the balance of the house layout. Ayah, however, suspected that perhaps someone he knew was planning to move in. Tasuku replied that he didn't know anyone in that world. She agreed to drop the topic, mentioning that she just had a hunch they might eventually end up with more housemates. Tasuku felt a bit annoyed, thinking she shouldn't go around planting strange ideas about more people joining them. He then paused, wondering where he had left off in his narration. The best part of the house, he thought, was the bed he had crafted together with Belle. It was a true masterpiece of craftsmanship, made with rubber and supported by beams attached to either side of the mat, giving it a gentle, hammock-like sag that provided ultimate comfort. Even by his own high standards, it turned out to be a perfect resting chamber. That night, their dinner also served as a celebration, marking both their cohabitation and the completion of the house's expansion. The two of them held a small party to commemorate the occasion. Their meal had also been upgraded, the newest addition being a bread-like creation made from barley. Tasuku had restructured the barley into flour to make bread without butter, sugar, or yeast, quite an achievement. As an experiment, he had mixed water and salt to knead the dough and baked it thin, which resulted in a wonderful, rich, and subtly sweet treat. Ayah had also foraged mushrooms and mountain vegetables, which were incredibly delicious. Tasuku was especially pleased with the wild spices they had brought back, garlic, chili, and even lemongrass, which allowed him to enhance the flavors beautifully. To him, it felt like a true blessing. And then, during dinner, Belle made a proposal. Tasuku wondered if Belle wanted to start growing cotton. She agreed, explaining that she had run out of materials after making the bed and other items for the house. Tasuku was surprised to hear that. Belle then revealed that their supply had completely run out, leaving them with zero inventory. Tasuku felt bad, knowing that those materials were things she had worked hard to gather. However, she reassured him that it wasn't a problem, saying that making them all had been a lot of fun. It was about to resist Belle, but she placed a finger on its mouth and explained that it made sense to have materials like cotton and linen ready if they planned to stay. That was why she wondered whether they could grow cotton themselves. All they needed were the seeds. She then asked if Tasuku had any plans for that. Tasuku thought that, in the game, he used to buy seeds from merchants. While eating, Ayah noticed Tasuku's pale face and commented that the seeds would be easy to obtain. Belle became excited, wondering if Ayah was serious, and Ayah replied that they could manage it with Tasuku's abilities. She asked if Tasuku had already forgotten how the barley was growing in their fields and how he had obtained those seeds. Tasuku recalled that he had gotten them by cutting down random weeds. Ayah then said they should be able to find other kinds of seeds by using the same logic, perhaps even acquiring seeds from different plants while exploring. With that, it was decided, and both of them headed into the forest to gather seeds, though Tasuku knew it would also lead to unexpected events connected to the earlier flag. It was the 8th day of Tasuku's life in that world, and he was currently in the forest to gather cotton seeds. However, he hadn't come there alone. After all, one would need 9 lives to survive in such a dangerous place by themselves. Ayah appeared confused and wondered what he was even babbling about. Thinking that was enough talk, she urged him to move ahead, and Tasuku agreed. As they continued through the forest, Ayah pointed at a plant and told Tasuku to take a look, suggesting that the herb in front of her might also be a spice. Tasuku thought that their plan was to gather seeds for cotton, wild herbs, and spices. He had only obtained barley seeds from cutting down modified weeds, and he still had no clue what might sprout from other plants. That was why he needed to grow them first to see the results and whether it would actually work. If he could successfully cultivate cotton and vegetables, it would bring great profit, and perhaps they could even make new clothes from the barley fibers. Tasuku then called out to Ayah, wondering where she got her clothes, since she had once said she made them herself. Ayah replied that she had long been in contact with a traveling merchant with whom she had traded for years, and she was one of his regular customers. Tasuku gave it a thought, and Ayah went on to explain that she lived by hunting, trading hides and fangs for cloth and food. Tasuku asked whether she had any regular meeting schedule with that merchant, but Ayah replied that she simply called him whenever she had stockpiled enough to trade, since the merchant was always busy. Tasuku asked if that method really worked for her. She nodded and told him that if he was fine with it, he could come visit her home next time. Tasuku seemed excited about the idea, and Ayah added that if she had barley or something similar, they would gladly trade. Tasuku then recalled that Ayah was a calico, considered cursed, and wondered whether it wasn't difficult for her to trade with merchants. After all, she had once said that both catfolk and humans saw her as an outcast. So who could this merchant be? Someone willing to trade with a cursed person. As Tasuku was lost in thought, Ayah called out loudly, telling him to stop spacing out and look ahead. When he did, he saw a woman lying nearby, injured. Tasuku wondered who she was, but Ayah reassured him not to worry since the woman was still breathing. As they approached, they realized she was a high elf and decided to help her. They tried treating her wounds, and as she slowly regained consciousness, they asked if she was all right. The woman muttered something about her stomach, and Tasuku wondered if she was in pain, but she revealed that she was simply hungry. Tasuku and Ayah were both taken aback as the woman suddenly started crying, saying she was starving and felt deeply embarrassed as her stomach growled loudly. They brought the girl back to their house and gave her some food. She immediately began eating in a hurry, and Tasuku told her to calm down, assuring her that there was plenty of food. She thanked them, saying everything was so delicious that she couldn't stop eating. It was her first time tasting barley bread, and she said it was incredibly good. Tasuku replied that he had made the dough using whatever ingredients they had on hand, so it was more of an approximation than a proper recipe. The girl smiled and said it didn't matter. It was still delicious. Tasuku then thought to himself that the high elf was not quite what he had imagined. He had always believed that high elves were supposed to be tall, elegant, and perfectly built, but this one didn't seem to match that image. Ayah casually remarked that the high elf was rather well-rounded and asked if anyone else in her tribe looked like that. Tasuku was stunned by such a blunt and direct question. The high elf stopped eating, looking uncomfortable, and Tasuku quickly told Ayah that it was rude to say something like that to someone they had just met. Ayah seemed confused and asked what he meant. Tasuku explained that many people were very sensitive about their weight and body shape. The elf, however, said it was fine. After all, what Ayah said was true. She admitted that she was the only one in her entire clan who was a bit on the heavier side. Normally, high elves lived far up in the northern mountains, so Tasuku wondered what she was doing all the way in the forest. The elf replied that she had simply collapsed in the woods, and that it was probably because of her size. They soon learned that the elf's name was Elise, and she originally lived in a village deep within the northern mountains. As Ayah had guessed, Elise was the only one in her graceful and elegant high elf clan with a plump figure. Elise admitted that she loved to eat and couldn't help reaching for food whenever it was nearby, a bad habit she could never control. Because of this, everyone in her clan had nicknamed her Big Eater Elise. She even used to receive extra portions during the village harvest. Tasuku wondered what had happened to her until 2 years ago. Elise explained that there had been another high elf village nearby, but around that time, a land dispute broke out between the two settlements. Ayah guessed that her village had lost the conflict and been forced to give up their land, which led to all the troubles that followed. Elise was surprised and asked how Ayah knew all that. Acting confident, Ayah said that desperate times made desperate minds. When people were starving, they would take from the weak no matter the cost. Once her village lost its farmland, they could no longer grow enough crops, and their food supplies quickly ran out. The entire village barely managed to survive. Belle commented that it must have been especially difficult for Elise since she loved eating so much. Tasuku found the whole situation strangely ironic. Elise said she indeed ate more than anyone else, which made her feel out of place among her people. When the villagers decided to explore new hunting grounds, she volunteered to help. However, because she was clumsy, she got separated from the group and lost her way. She tried walking back to her village for several days, but before she realized it, she had wandered all the way into that forest. Belle understood then. It was just as she thought. The forest in that area was special, often referred to as the Black Sea of Trees. It was easy to lose one's bearings there, and many travelers never found their way out. Ayah added that the forest was full of wild beasts, and for someone unfamiliar with it, surviving there was nearly impossible. Belle then realized that Elise had actually spent several days inside that forest, which meant she had truly risked her life to survive. Elise explained that she had used barrier magic at night to protect herself from danger. By summoning the spirit of sleep, she could calm nearby beasts, making the Black Sea of Trees a much safer place to rest. However, she admitted that she was quite clumsy and that chanting the spell took her a long time, which made setting up the barrier rather difficult. Belle told her not to be so modest. After all, surviving in that forest without a single injury meant she must have created a very powerful barrier. She guessed that the barrier's radius was probably around 5 meters, but Elise shyly corrected her, saying it was actually 20 meters. Belle was stunned and asked again to confirm, realizing that Elise's barrier truly extended 20 meters, though it took her a while to cast. Tasuku looked confused, wondering why that was such a big deal. Belle explained that the effectiveness of magic depended on the caster's skill, but even so, this was an extraordinary feat. Tasuku nodded, thinking that made sense, but Ayah quickly added that most barrier magic only covered about 3 meters at most. Even the elders in her village could barely maintain a 5-meter radius, and the so-called sages could extend it to 10 at best. Hearing that, Tasuku was completely shocked. Ayah too found it hard to believe Elise's words. She couldn't imagine anyone casually creating a 20-meter wide barrier all by themselves. Belle said it was absolutely insane and sounded unbelievable. Elise replied that she had always struggled to control her own power. Whenever she helped with logging, she would accidentally chop down everything in sight, and once when she tried fishing, she ended up draining almost the entire river. She confessed that she truly wished she could use magic as gracefully as everyone else. Tasuku wondered if her village had cast her out because they couldn't handle her immense power. He thought that if they had learned to manage her abilities better, they might not have lost the war against the other elves. Elise then asked if all of them lived there together. Belle nodded, explaining that she had only recently arrived herself. Elise thanked them, saying they had saved her life and even treated her to a meal. She admitted she knew it was asking a lot and that she might sound selfish, but she asked if she could stay there with them. Feeling a bit embarrassed, Elise said that she might be clumsy, but she would do anything they needed her to do. Everyone fell silent for a moment until Tasuku finally spoke up, saying that he had only recently started living there and that the environment was still harsh, so he asked if she would really be fine with that. Elise nodded without hesitation. Tasuku smiled, saying he was happy to welcome her, and then glanced at the others, wondering what they thought. Suddenly, Belle stood up, walked over to Elise, and said they should get along well, then pulled her into a hug. Elise, though flustered, returned the gesture. Their awkward embrace made Ayah chuckle, and she commented that they would definitely need more hands to help with their settlement's development. She added that Elise seemed genuinely earnest, so everything would surely be fine. Ayah said she was really glad about it. Tasuku, a bit confused, wondered what she meant. Ayah teased that at least now the 4 bedrooms wouldn't go to waste. She asked if Tasuku had already expected something like this to happen. He quickly denied it, saying he didn't have any psychic powers to foresee the future. Michelin, keeping her tone playful yet sharp, remarked that since Tasuku was a foreigner, he might possess some hidden, extraordinary talent, perhaps even the ability to attract women without realizing it. Tasuku groaned, saying that was ridiculous and asking what kind of power that even was. If that were true, he joked, he'd use it to send them all back home instead. He thought that if Ayah ever found out he had never had a girlfriend even at the age of 30, she would definitely mock him without mercy. Meanwhile, Ayah mentioned that next time, when they expanded, they should pay more attention to the number of bedrooms. Tasuku told her not to worry since he wasn't planning to expand anytime soon. Ayah just gave him a doubtful look, but didn't press further. The next morning, Tasuku began preparing breakfast together with Elise. During their work, Elise mentioned that she loved baking so much that she always carried yeast with her. Tasuku was surprised, realizing that the pseudo-bread he had been making before lacked yeast, which was why the dough never rose properly. Elise explained that she had natural yeast made from dried grapes, perfect for fermentation and ideal for soft, fluffy, multi-grain bread. Hearing that, Tasuku asked her to make some bread. As Elise worked, she commented that barley had an unexpectedly strong elasticity and felt quite different from fine flour, which surprised her. Tasuku smiled quietly, and she asked if something was wrong. He shook his head, saying nothing was wrong. He just thought she was a really skilled cook. Elise flustered and quickly said she wasn't that great. In fact, he was the one who seemed good at cooking. Tasuku chuckled and admitted that cooking was his hobby since he had lived alone for a long time. Elise smiled, saying she really loved eating, but she also enjoyed cooking. Tasuku told her he could tell. Her movements were quick and confident, showing real experience. Elise shook her head, saying that back in her village, people called her slow and fat, though she actually thought her cooking was pretty good, even if others didn't agree. Tasuku assured her he wasn't just flattering her and added softly that she was adorable and should have more confidence in herself. Elise blushed deeply at his words and quickly said she would focus on baking the bread. Just then, Belle walked in, teasing that the two of them looked like a newlywed couple. Tasuku froze, his face turning pale, and awkwardly thanked her for the lovely morning joke. Belle frowned and replied that she wasn't joking at all. Changing the subject, she said that Ayah was hungry and asked if there was anything to eat. Tasuku apologized, saying it would take a little longer, and asked them to wait in the living room. Belle agreed, and after some time, Tasuku and Elise brought out the freshly baked bread and breakfast for everyone. Ayah got excited the moment they arrived, saying she had been waiting for them to come. Tasuku teased that if she was really that hungry, she should have come to help them cook. Ayah looked disheartened and said that she would only slow him down if she tried to help. She then took a bite of the bread and exclaimed that it was absolutely divine, immediately reaching for another piece. Tasuku sighed in frustration, clearly irritated, but Ayah told him to just let it go and indulge her whims once in a while. After all, she had her reasons. Tasuku raised an eyebrow, saying he had no idea what she was talking about, but would listen anyway. Acting overly dramatic, Ayah said that a delicate girl like her had to shiver alone through the night, so she thought it would be fine to lean on him for warmth. Tasuku blinked in confusion, and Ayah sighed, asking if he still didn't get it. Since they had expanded the house, she wouldn't be able to sleep beside him anymore. Tasuku nearly spit out his drink at her words. Ayah continued with a nostalgic tone, saying she still remembered those cold nights when they kept each other warm, and now she could only fill that emptiness with food. Tasuku shouted that she was the only one who felt that way. Belle suddenly lit up, saying it seemed Ayah and Tasuku were much bolder than she thought. Elise looked surprised and said she didn't know that Tasuku and Ayah were in that kind of relationship. Trying to change the subject, Ayah quickly asked about Tasuku's plans for the day. He replied that he planned to expand the fields since he had gathered some new seeds. Belle added that the cotton seeds she had requested had finally arrived, so she would help with the farming as well. Elise then said she was quite good at farming and would lend her elven skills too. Tasuku thanked both of them and then glanced at Ayah. She seemed puzzled and asked why he was looking at her like that. Was he envious? Tasuku denied it, saying he was just wondering why she wasn't helping since she was also an elf. Ayah frowned, saying she would help, but there was something more important. She revealed that she wanted Tasuku to meet someone that day, someone she had called over. Tasuku was curious who it could be. Ayah smiled mischievously and asked if he remembered the traveling merchant she had mentioned before. After breakfast, they decided to go outside to watch the ritual that Ayah performed to summon the merchant. They saw her lighting a firecracker, and she assured them it would be fine and told them to stand back. When the cracker burned, the fire shot high into the sky and exploded. Tasuku wondered if the merchant would actually appear like that, and Ayah agreed. He then noticed a small, glowing orb in the sky, which he found strange. Ayah explained that it was just an additional effect, and that the key signal was a sound triggered at the moment of explosion. Tasuku didn't hear any sound, and Ayah clarified that it emitted a special frequency only the merchant could detect. Belle became excited since it was her first time dealing with a merchant. She was thrilled beyond belief and wondered when the merchant would arrive. Ayah replied that if they were nearby, they might come that same day, but if they were occupied, it could take a few days, no more than 3. Elise mentioned she had never met a traveling merchant before, which made her excited too, and she wondered what kind of goods they might bring. Ayah explained that merchants traveled across the continent, trading in all sorts of items, including rare delicacies that even Elise had never tasted. Tasuku pointed out that even if the merchant came, they didn't have much to sell, and the barley harvest was still low. Ayah told him he was missing the point. It wasn't just about immediate trading, but about establishing connections. She explained that they needed to show the merchant what they had, learn what the merchant sought in exchange, and that would make future trades smoother. Tasuku understood that nothing would really begin until the merchant arrived and decided to increase their barley production for trade. He thought of expanding the fields and began working, using his ability to till a square meter of soil at once. The task was easy for him, and Belle and Elise were astonished by his power. Ayah remarked that it was indeed impressive and looked like child's play for him. Tasuku wondered why she was smirking at that. He then expanded the original field by about 60 meters on one side and left the seed planting to the other 3. In the meantime, he planned to create another field farther north, about 10 square meters wide, to test the cotton and plant the seeds he had gathered in the forest the previous day. He thought that since they wouldn't know what might grow, it would be better to plant them at some distance. It would be ideal if the vegetables or spices grew alongside the cotton, and since their growth period matched that of barley, they should be ready in about 3 days. After some time, Belle came to call Tasuku, saying that if she didn't start watering soon, it seemed like they would run out of the water stored at home. Tasuku agreed, realizing he needed to go fetch more buckets. He thought that expanding the field so much would make watering a real challenge, and constantly trekking to the forest spring for water was a hassle. As he was thinking about all this, Elise asked if something was wrong. He said it was nothing serious, but having a well would make things much easier. However, digging blindly without knowing where the groundwater lay didn't seem wise, and digging too deep underground could also be risky because of possible oxygen shortage. At that moment, Belle mentioned that she could locate a water vein using magic. Elise added that if time wasn't an issue, she could search for it too. Tasuku was surprised to hear that, and they explained that since they often lived in rugged mountains and harsh terrain, the ability to find water sources was essential. They also said that while digging, they could use spirit magic to protect themselves from poisonous gas, and Belle could use illumination magic to light up the dark. Tasuku became excited and suggested they start searching for a water vein right away. After searching, they found a suitable spot near the bathhouse, located roughly in the middle of the house, fields, bathhouse, and toilet area. Elise began preparing barrier magic and asked them to wait a moment. Tasuku agreed and asked how deep they would need to dig to reach the water source. Belle replied that it should be around 20 meters, give or take a little. Tasuku thought about it and wondered where Ayah was. He noticed that she was sitting nearby, looking drowsy. He thought that cats seemed to treat napping as a full-time job, and since she had helped with the fieldwork earlier, he decided not to disturb her. After that, Tasuku began digging near the toilet area. He plunged the shovel into the ground and swiftly carved out soil blocks about 50 centimeters deep, one after another. They kept digging deeper, and thanks to Elise and Belle's magic, the inside of the pit stayed bright and well ventilated, making it easy to breathe. Tasuku felt as if he were living the ultimate cheat life of a novel's protagonist. From above, Belle called down to ask if he was all right. Tasuku tied a rope around himself, signaled her to pull, and knew that water had just begun to seep in. Belle called Elise and asked her to get Ayah's help to pull Tasuku out. Together, they finally pulled him up, and they all asked how things looked below. Tasuku said that water had started seeping around his feet, which was why he came back up, though he felt they might have needed to dig just a bit deeper. Elise reassured him that it should be fine. Given some time, the water would naturally collect in the well. Tasuku wondered if that was really true, but Belle explained that the water level would likely rise significantly by the next day. Since it was already getting dark, they decided to build the well's frame to prevent any accidents. That night, they quickly built the well using stone and completed it in no time. Even though Tasuku would be able to use it fully only by the next day, having a steady supply of water for bathing and drinking already felt like a true blessing. Still, he thought to himself that it was such a mundane isekai life, no grand magic, no epic battles, and no world-shaking conspiracies. Yet, compared to the exhausting life he had lived as a salaryman, this peaceful existence was truly the best. Perhaps it was wrong to take that for granted, even for a moment. The next morning, Tasuku went out to check the water level in the well. As he stepped outside, he looked up and saw a dragon flying across the sky, heading straight toward him. The sight left him frozen in fear. Tasuku looked terrified as the dragon swooped down close to him before soaring back into the sky. He stood frozen, completely confused about what was happening. Just then, Ayah walked over and casually remarked that the dragon's entrance was quite a flashy greeting. Tasuku turned to her in disbelief and asked if she knew that dragon. She replied that it was the traveling merchant she had mentioned the previous day, which left Tasuku utterly astonished. Moments later, the dragon descended again, and as it landed, its massive body began to shrink and change shape until it transformed into a human. The man greeted Ayah warmly. Tasuku could hardly believe his eyes. He had just seen a dragon turn into a person. The merchant smiled and said it was good to see Ayah in good health, even referring to her as Princess Calico. Ayah frowned slightly, saying they had already met last month and that he was still showing off mid-air like a child. She teased that he must have plenty of energy to spare. The merchant laughed and said her words were harsh as ever. Curious, Tasuku asked what kind of princess Ayah was. She brushed it off, saying it was nothing. He simply liked to call her that. The merchant then added that with her chestnut-colored hair, snow-white skin, and elegant face, it was only natural for people to call her a princess. After that, the merchant extended his hand to Tasuku with a friendly smile and introduced himself as Alfred, a dragonkin merchant, saying he looked forward to getting to know him. Tasuku shook his hand and introduced himself as well. Alfred studied him for a moment, commenting that his name sounded quite unusual and asking where he might be from. Before Tasuku could answer, Ayah stepped in, telling him not to worry and assuring Alfred that Tasuku was an outsider, not from this world. Hearing that, Alfred politely addressed Tasuku as the gentleman and apologized with a kind, respectful tone. Alfred explained that he had only been curious because the area felt unfamiliar and the atmosphere was rather unusual, so he asked them to forgive his rudeness. Ayah sighed and said that his odd behavior often disappointed her, though she admitted his trading skills were truly reliable. Alfred then asked if the two of them lived there alone. Ayah shook her head and told him that two others, a high elf and a dark elf, also lived with them, sharing a communal lifestyle. Tasuku asked where the other two were, but Ayah replied that it didn't really matter at the moment. She also reminded him that Alfred had radiated a terrifying killing intent earlier while flying over the house in his dragon form, which had frightened everyone. Alfred immediately apologized, explaining that he had only meant to casually check if anyone was causing trouble for Ayah. She scolded him for being unnecessarily aggressive. Alfred noted that Tasuku hadn't even seemed to notice the killing intent and hadn't flinched at the sight of a dragon, wondering if that was a unique resilience only an outsider could possess. Ayah teased that Tasuku was probably just thick as a brick. Tasuku frowned, wondering who was saying such things about him, while noticing that Ayah seemed perfectly calm herself. She explained that she was used to such situations. They went way back. Tasuku thought to himself that she sure talked a lot for someone who didn't even lift a finger to help prepare the meal, thinking she must have grown rusty without realizing it. Their bickering quickly escalated until Alfred stepped in, asking them to stop and wondering if he should proceed. Tasuku apologized, embarrassed that Alfred had come from such a great distance only to witness their argument. Alfred laughed, saying their camaraderie was actually delightful to watch, and then asked why they had summoned him. Ayah explained that she wanted to introduce Alfred to Tasuku and also planned to set up their base there, making the place their official trading ground. Alfred agreed and asked if that meant they had something worth trading. Tasuku replied that he didn't have much but hoped to sell some pearl barley. Alfred was surprised to hear that and, noticing the fields, remarked that they could probably expect a decent harvest. He then asked if he could take a sample to assess its quality first. Ayah offered to fetch it, saying she also wanted to trade some goods she had gathered during her hunts. It was convenient to handle everything at once. She added, half-jokingly, that if she didn't go right away, Alfred might lecture her later and that it was outrageous for an elder like him to act that way. Tasuku snapped at her to hurry and bring the sample already, clearly irritated. As they waited, Alfred told Tasuku there was no need to be so tense, assuring him that everything was fine. He admitted that he had been on edge himself and couldn't really judge anyone for being cautious. He explained that he had never seen Ayah spend time with anyone else in years, and this was the first time he had ever seen her with someone new. That was why he had worried she might be getting deceived by shady people, and ended up overthinking it. Still, he said it was a relief to see there was nothing suspicious, and more than that, he had never seen her look so genuinely happy before. To him, it was like witnessing a completely new side of her, so full of life. Tasuku said that she had always been that way, and Alfred smiled, saying that such warmth was a sign of deep trust, and that he couldn't help but feel a little jealous of Tasuku. Tasuku hesitated but finally asked if it was true that Ayah was a cursed child of the catfolk. Alfred confirmed that even among the dragonkin, there were some who believed in that legend. Tasuku then asked why Alfred still chose to trade with her if that was the case. Alfred replied that while some customers would recoil from goods associated with a so-called cursed child, the golden rule of business was simple: trade only with trustworthy partners and deal in reliable goods. Nothing more, nothing less. Everything else, he said, simply didn't matter. Alfred asked Tasuku if he wasn't walking the same path as his own, considering he was living under the same roof as Ayah, fully aware that she was labeled as the cursed child. Tasuku replied that he didn't believe in superstitions or such things, and even if misfortune were to strike him, he would never blame Ayah for it. He added that calico cats were the cutest ones. Hearing that, Alfred laughed, finding it adorably unexpected. Tasuku wondered if he had said something that funny. Alfred replied that it wasn't funny at all, but he sincerely apologized if it seemed so, explaining that he simply felt happy knowing someone as genuine as Tasuku interacted with Ayah with such pure intentions. Tasuku remarked that Alfred was laughing a little too much about it. Alfred cheerfully said there was nothing more joyful than seeing such kindness, and that he saw Ayah as his little sister. He added that even though Ayah might not take it kindly if she heard that, as her elder brother figure, all he wished for was her happiness. He hoped to have a proper conversation with Tasuku about her beyond business matters. Tasuku agreed, and felt glad about it. Alfred then requested him to keep his feelings toward Ayah a secret, and Tasuku promised he would. Just then, Ayah arrived, saying she had fetched it for Tasuku, and he wondered if she was still continuing about that same thing. They decided to keep the barley for the time being. There was no spear boar tusk left, 5 small monostones, and 3 medium ones, but no fur available for trade at the moment. Ayah mentioned that it was because her roommate had a knack for sieving and crafting, so she would let her handle it for now. Alfred said it was a shame. Tasuku wondered if they were referring to the spear boar from the previous time. Ayah confirmed, adding that its tusks made excellent merchandise, often used as ingredients for medicine, and mainly as magic conduits. Alfred noted all this down, commenting that tusks of such size were rare and highly valuable. Tasuku then asked about the mana stones, and Ayah, looking disappointed, explained that they were exactly what the name suggested: stones found inside monsters' bodies. Tasuku still didn't quite understand. Alfred added that people hadn't completely figured out the reason yet, but certain creatures known as monsters possessed something like a magical reservoir inside their bodies. Tasuku asked if that was what the mana stone was. Alfred explained that the purer the stone, the higher its value, much like a gemstone. He held one up to the sunlight, realizing how precious the material was. He then asked whether they preferred to receive cash or goods in exchange. Ayah turned to Tasuku and asked if there was anything he wanted. Tasuku wondered why she was asking, saying that she should decide since she was the one who collected those stones during the hunt. She called him an idiot, reminding him that they had hunted the boar together and lived under the same roof. Since she also used the household items, she said she would leave the trading decisions to him. Tasuku still hesitated, but Alfred assured him that everything was fine and then showed him a list of the items he could offer. As Tasuku checked through it, he realized there were many things they actually needed, which would be a great help. Tasuku then mentioned the list of items they wanted, and upon hearing that, Alfred immediately snapped his fingers to make all those things appear. Several bags filled with the requested goods materialized before them. He then handed them over and asked Tasuku to check everything. Tasuku felt that magic was incredibly convenient, almost like a cheat. All the items he had wanted were laid out neatly, and he was truly grateful for Alfred's help. Alfred told him that if there was anything else he needed, he should just let him know, and he would bring it along the next time they met. Tasuku wondered if he should ask Ayah to summon Alfred again, but Alfred said he would come himself once he received the barley. He suggested meeting again in a week. Tasuku asked him to bring vegetables, fruits, seedlings, and some iron cookware next time. Alfred agreed and promised to pick out the best items for him before leaving. He first snapped his fingers again, making all the bags disappear, saying he would return under normal circumstances next time. Ayah agreed to that and asked him to keep things as quiet as possible. Alfred nodded, saying he would remember, and requested her to convey his apologies to the others for any inconvenience. Then, transforming into a dragon, he leapt into the air and flew away at great speed. Belle was furious, as the sudden transformation had frightened her badly. Belle became excited upon hearing that a dragon had appeared before them. At that moment, the 4 of them were enjoying a meal together. She wondered why they hadn't told her earlier that the dragon was actually the merchant in disguise. Ayah explained that she thought it would be amusing to keep it a surprise, but admitted she hadn't expected such a dramatic person to show up, and she apologized for it. Belle said it was water under the bridge and told her to forget about it. Tasuku mentioned that Alfred had already apologized for releasing his killing intent and said that next time he would arrive through a normal entrance. Elise added that she had never seen a dragon before and would love to encounter one in the future. Tasuku wondered whether dragons were really that rare. Nisa explained that dragons rarely left their secluded lands, which were hidden behind the treacherous mountains in the west, and they were not the kind one could casually spot wandering around. Belle added that if it had been a wyvern, she would have gone hunting for them every time. Tasuku asked if wyverns were simply smaller dragons and whether they really hunted such creatures. He then remarked that moments like these reminded him how ordinary he was compared to the others, who all seemed so extraordinary. Ayah questioned what nonsense he was talking about, saying that he was rarer than any dragon. Tasuku wondered why she would say something like that. Belle pointed out that being an outsider was already a big deal, and Elise agreed, saying she had only heard about outsiders in fairy tales. Tasuku was taken aback to realize that he was the rarest among them all. 2 days later, the four of them went to harvest cotton when they saw a dragon flying in the sky. Tasuku wondered if it was Alfred, but recalled that he wasn't supposed to arrive for another week. Ayah confirmed that it was indeed Alfred, suggesting something must have happened. Alfred then transformed into his human form and apologized for arriving without notice. Tasuku asked if there was any problem, realizing that Alfred had come much earlier than planned. Alfred explained that his visit was about the barley he had taken from Tasuku. Tasuku recalled that it was the sample he had given earlier. Alfred went on to say that there had been a small issue. At the Merchant Guild, he had asked a grain appraiser to examine the barley sample. Tasuku wondered if the quality had turned out to be poor and therefore unsellable, but Alfred replied that it was quite the opposite. The barley Tasuku had produced was far beyond top-tier quality. It was so exceptional that every appraiser had reevaluated it multiple times just to be certain, but even after extensive checks, the verdict remained unchanged. The barley's quality was so extraordinary that it caused an uproar in the guild. The place descended into chaos, and veteran merchants bombarded Alfred with countless questions. He said that for now, he had managed to keep the situation under control. Tasuku grew concerned, wondering if it would be safe for his location to be known to those merchants. Alfred questioned whether Tasuku understood what barley of such quality meant. If people discovered that it was produced by the mythical outsider, they would surely swarm to the area. Tasuku jokingly remarked that he might be the rare NPC in that world. Alfred continued, saying that he preferred for them all to live peacefully and didn't want the place to draw unwanted attention. Tasuku agreed, thinking that although Alfred said it out of concern for everyone's safety, he was likely most worried about Ayah, since some people might still harbor resentment toward anything related to the cursed child. Alfred then mentioned that it was surprising none of them had realized the barley they ate daily was of such exceptional quality. Ayah replied that it was hard to tell, as she had never eaten barley before coming there. Belle agreed, saying Tasuku's cooking was so good that she had assumed that was simply how barley was supposed to taste. Elise added that before coming there, she had only ever eaten bread made from fine wheat. Tasuku understood that the barley was indeed of top-tier quality, but he wondered why Alfred had come in such a hurry. Alfred then got to the main point. He wanted to propose a contract to become Tasuku's exclusive merchant, responsible for handling all the sales of Tasuku's goods. Tasuku was taken aback and found the idea of an exclusive merchant somewhat confusing. Alfred suggested that Tasuku allow him to rephrase his proposal, saying he believed it could be a great idea. Tasuku wondered if Alfred was referring to some kind of government-endorsed merchant, but pointed out that they didn't have any political power that could benefit Alfred. Alfred replied that there would be benefits for both sides. He then explained that the Merchant Guild strictly prohibited dealings with anyone who already had an exclusive merchant. Tasuku asked why such a rule existed, and Alfred clarified that it was meant to prevent other merchants from deliberately inflating prices or attempting to deceive exclusive partners into unfair deals. The system, he said, was built entirely on trust. Additionally, merchants were not allowed to visit clients with existing exclusive contracts at random, which ensured their peace and privacy wouldn't be disrupted. Tasuku then asked what benefits such an arrangement would bring to both him and Alfred. Alfred replied that it would allow them to exclusively sell the rare items made there, including the high-quality barley crafted by an outsider. Even if the goods were expensive, there would definitely be buyers. He added that the guild's information network was vast, and it was only a matter of time before their location was discovered, which was why he wanted to secure a contract before any competitors could. Tasuku agreed, realizing there was no wonder Alfred had rushed to meet him. Tasuku then suggested that they should go ahead and sign the exclusive merchant contract. Alfred seemed surprised by how quickly Tasuku had decided and asked if he was truly sure about it. Tasuku wondered if Alfred was opposed to the idea, but Alfred replied that it was a fantastic opportunity for him. Tasuku explained that he only wanted to live peacefully, and if he was going to trade, he would rather do business with someone he trusted. The two shook hands, and Tasuku said he looked forward to making the partnership work. Alfred agreed, saying he was also eager to work together. At that point, Alfred mentioned that there was something he wanted Tasuku's advice on. He explained that they had noticed the barley wasn't settling properly, and technically speaking, it felt like a waste to sell it as it was. It had been classified into 5 grades, and Tasuku wondered if the barley they grew wasn't actually the best. Alfred agreed, saying that although it surpassed even the highest grade in quality, it still had to be sold under the top grade classification. Ayah remarked that it should be worth more than the highest grade. Alfred nodded, saying that while the assessments indicated it could fetch nearly double the top grade price, the guild's grading system didn't allow for a new category. Tasuku, surprised, asked why they couldn't simply create a new grade above the highest one if the barley was truly that exceptional. Alfred replied that if they had enough supply in the market, creating a new grade might work. Belle pointed out that since Tasuku was the only one producing it, maintaining a steady supply would be difficult. Elise added that barley itself was already considered a luxury item and production was limited. Alfred explained that because of that, they were forced to sell it as regular barley, which felt like a complete waste. He said they needed a way to sell it at a fair price and asked if anyone had an idea. Tasuku thought about it, admitting that he had been fine just trading barley for other goods, but the situation had quickly grown larger than expected. Ayah then suggested that they could market it as something other than barley. Alfred said that was a tall order. Belle joked that it would be like barley that wasn't barley at all, saying she wanted to see how that riddle would play out. Elise commented that, if she hadn't known better, the idea actually sounded intriguing and she'd want to try it herself. Tasuku muttered to himself, repeating, "Barley, but not barley." Ayah teased him, asking if he was really thinking that deeply about her joke. But Tasuku asked her to wait, because the idea might actually work. He said they could give their barley a brand name. Everyone looked confused, so Tasuku explained that in his country there was a grain called rice. In his homeland, rice came in many varieties, each with its own brand name, and the high-end branded rice sold for much higher prices. Alfred immediately understood the concept and agreed that they could do the same with barley. Tasuku nodded, saying they would sell it as a new branded variety distinct from the regular kind. Alfred felt confident, saying the idea could definitely work. Alfred continued that if they launched it as a brand new product, they would be able to set their own grade and have more flexibility in adjusting the price. Tasuku added that the real challenge would be whether the Merchant Guild would approve such a move. Alfred assured him not to worry, explaining that the barley had already been certified as superior to the existing pearl barley, and the guild would likely find it easier to treat it as a different commodity altogether. Ayah then asked what name they should use when introducing it to the market. Alfred gave it some thought and said they needed a name that didn't remind people of regular barley. Ayah suggested calling it Cat God Signature Barley. Tasuku immediately rejected the idea, saying cats had nothing to do with it, and she had literally just called it barley again. He wondered if she really thought that was a good idea, calling her completely delusional. Belle then chimed in, saying she had come up with one. Bellmark's Emo Wheat. Tasuku rejected that as well, reminding her that there was no such thing as a Bellmark brand to begin with. Elise suggested calling it Tasuku's barley since he was the one who made it. Tasuku refused again, though Elise still insisted it was a good name. Feeling embarrassed, Tasuku said he didn't want his name attached to a product. The three of them then surrounded him, teasing that if he kept rejecting all their suggestions, he should come up with one himself. Tasuku wondered why he was the one being grilled, feeling like he was just being honest, but somehow ended up as the bad guy. Still, they needed to decide on something. He turned to Alfred and asked if the dragonfolk's country was far from there. Alfred confirmed that it lay westward, beyond the black sea of trees, past the treacherous mountains in a distant land. Tasuku then proposed calling it Hakura barley, since it was grown in a faraway place. Everyone thought about it for a moment, and Alfred agreed, saying it was fitting for a new variety. The others also found it to be a lovely name. Tasuku was pleased that they all liked it. Alfred then mentioned that he would return in a week as planned to finalize the arrangements, and that the product registration should be processed quickly. However, to establish it as a luxury brand, they would need a decent supply volume. He asked Tasuku to prepare twice the usual amount next time. Tasuku was shocked to hear that, but Alfred reassured him that while it would be a burden, maintaining quality was what mattered most, and his cooperation would be greatly appreciated. After saying that, Alfred transformed into a dragon and took off, leaving Tasuku staring up at the sky, thinking about the massive amount of barley he now had to produce. Belle said it was good to know that there were people out there who appreciated what Tasuku and the others were making. She was certain there would be even more people interested in the future, so she encouraged everyone to work hard to expand the fields. Elise added that she would do her best to support Tasuku in any way she could. Both of them began helping, and Ayah remarked that if it meant she would get to enjoy delicious food, she supposed she wouldn't mind working and would lend Tasuku a hand as well. Tasuku thanked them all and asked everyone to start working together to expand the fields. They decided to expand the field westward from their current location. To do that, they needed to clear the forest, and even with their abilities, the area was so vast that Tasuku asked Elise if she could use her spirit magic. Elise agreed, but mentioned that her magic would take time, given the immense size of the area. Tasuku told her that they planned to create more fields besides Haramugi and asked her to go all out. She promised to do her best, and while Elise prepared her spirit magic, the others began harvesting cotton and expanding the other fields. Despite some doubts, the cotton seeds planted in the forest grew into proper cotton. Just like in Haramugi, a quick hand chop split the cotton into fluff while the seeds fell to the ground. Tasuku left Ayah and Belle to gather the fallen cotton, and during that time he started working on another field. Belle called out to him, saying she wanted to ask something. Tasuku noted that the cotton grown in the forest seemed to be of high quality, though he wasn't sure why, as Ayah had simply told him to collect the leftover seeds. He wondered if something unusual had happened. Belle replied that she couldn't quite put it into words, but the cotton's texture and feel were so fine that it might be the best they had ever handled. Tasuku recalled that people often said Haramugi's harvests were leagues better than regular barley in quality, perhaps because the soil there was rich and absorbed nutrients well. He grew excited, eager to see how the other crops would turn out. When harvesting vegetables and seasoning ingredients, Tasuku used a hand chop to separate the seeds and continued expanding the fields. He found a black radish-like plant and decided to ask Ayah whether it was edible. Suddenly, they heard a loud noise coming from the forest. When they went to investigate, they discovered that the disturbance had been caused by Elise. She wondered aloud if she might have overdone it, but Tasuku assured her that it was fine. Watching the display of power up close, he could easily imagine how formidable Elise must have been back in the High Elf village. Tasuku knew that for expanding the fields, Elise's help was truly a lifesaver. They could process the fallen trees and shattered rocks into usable materials. He thanked her sincerely, saying that her support had helped them a great deal. Elise replied that it was nothing and that she would gladly help anytime he wanted, adding that she was genuinely happy to be of use to him. Tasuku then began checking the fallen trees to see how they could be restructured and repurposed, while the ground was tilled and turned into farmland. By the time all the Haramugi seeds were planted, the sky had already taken on the colors of dusk, and the long hours of intense work left his body aching. Now, it was only a matter of waiting for the harvest. He knew that the Haramugi fields no longer needed any further expansion and that the farming workload should not increase from then on. The next day, he expected to see the fields covered in lush green sprouts. However, what greeted his eyes instead was devastation. The entire field had been reduced to ruins. On the first day, the soft stems were supposed to sprout, and by the second day, the grains would begin to form so that he could harvest them on the third. But the tender parts had been eaten, and he realized he should have anticipated this. Living so close to the forest, it wasn't surprising that wild animals had come in search of food. The crops were delicious even to humans, so it was only natural that animals would find them just as tempting. Tasuku understood that the animals had made the fields their target. Ayah pointed out that this wasn't the time for discussion and urged him to look at how much damage had been done, saying it wasn't the moment to be impressed. Elise agreed, adding that destroying crops was unforgivable and that any pests or beasts that devoured them were mortal enemies of farmers, so they needed to be caught and eliminated immediately. Tasuku felt confused, noticing that Elise was now viewing things entirely from a farmer's perspective. He remarked that nothing was more frustrating than losing food to pests. Still, he added that even if they wanted to capture the culprits, they couldn't do it without knowing what kind of creatures they were dealing with. Elise speculated that if the animal was one that liked tender weeds, her first guess would be a 10-antlered deer. Tasuku then noted that the snakes in the area were already dangerous, so he wondered just what kind of beast they were about to face. Meta explained to him that the 10-antlered deer grew 10 horns on their heads and were herbivorous yet extremely aggressive, making them a particularly dangerous kind of deer. Elise revealed that in her village they used spirit magic to craft electric arrows specifically to deal with such creatures, and that they had to guard the fields day and night. She also mentioned that preparing the arrows only after spotting the deer would be difficult and risky. Ayah added that she could head into the forest to hunt them herself, but since the deer moved in herds, taking on such a large group alone would be exhausting. Belle said that even if they built a fence, the 10-antlered deer would easily break through it. The best they could do was to keep driving them away regularly so the creatures would learn that the area was dangerous. Tasuku wondered if she was joking, as he understood that pest control was an important part of farming, but he hadn't expected it to be this difficult. Moreover, since they had such a large field to manage, having only the 4 of them made them severely short-handed. Belle then asked if it would be all right for her to invite some of her friends to live there. Tasuku was curious about who they were, and she explained that her friends were strong, skilled in physical labor, and capable of handling 10-antlered deer like professionals. She believed they would be a great help. Tasuku agreed that it sounded good, but questioned whether her friends would even be willing to live in such a place. Belle laughed and asked him to give her a little credit, while Tasuku replied that before anything else, he wanted to settle down first and have a proper talk about it. Tasuku thought that Belle had asked for 3 days' time and had headed toward the eastern forest. He was unsure whether her persuasion would work, but if they gained more people, they would need to cultivate additional crops. He decided to replow the fields that had been ravaged and replant Haruka wheat. He had also asked Ayah to take charge of hunting in the forest, as they never had enough food. At that time, Elise was occupied with processing the seasonings from the fields and collecting wild fruits. After 3 days passed, Belle told Tasuku to prepare the materials for her friend's new house, which was why he had been chopping wood. Eventually, Ayah returned and Tasuku welcomed her. She was accompanied by her friends, giant wolves, which startled Tasuku. He wondered who they were, and Ayah explained that they were warwolves called the Gakuns. Tasuku felt even more alarmed, recalling the vicious werewolves he had read about in fantasy stories, creatures known for attacking humans or livestock in novels and manga. The 3 wolves standing at the front had sleek muscles and jet black fur that made them look like warriors, while the 7 behind them had beautiful, regular coats. The enormous cauldron that the wolves were carrying caught Tasuku's attention, and he wondered what they planned to do with it. Just then, Belle introduced Gakun and the others to Tasuku, suggesting that he greet them as well. Tasuku apologized for spacing out and then greeted them. Belle turned to Gakun and told him that Tasuku was the person she had mentioned before. Gakun stepped closer to inspect him, and though hesitant, Tasuku greeted him politely. Gakun addressed Tasuku with respect, but suddenly began roaring loudly before apologizing for his manners. He explained that he had heard from Belle how Tasuku had carved out that place on his own, and how mighty his muscle power was. He admitted that he had been eager to witness Tasuku's strength himself. However, in reality, Tasuku's muscle power was quite low, leaving him confused about what nonsense they were all talking about. He couldn't understand any of it. Then, Gaia introduced himself as the leader of the group and bowed to Tasuku as a formal greeting. Tasuku thanked him and bowed back. Belle explained that she had met them all after leaving the village and that they had recently become close. Tasuku wondered why and grew curious to know more. Gaia explained that they devoted themselves to the pursuit and perfection of muscles, striving daily to master the way of muscle. He added that lately he had been pondering the point of sculpting one's body if one couldn't properly display its power. Belle added that this happened when they had come to visit their place. Gaia nodded in agreement, mentioning that they even had special outfits made to showcase their physiques. Tasuku remembered the outfits Belle had made before. Gaia continued, saying that since they had agreed to help each other whenever needed, they now considered themselves lifelong best friends. Belle mentioned that she had made a certain request to all of them, which made Tasuku curious. Gaia, however, told him that it would have to wait for now and that there was no need to rush. He then resumed the introductions, letting the others introduce themselves. Tasuku wondered if they were like the Black Tri-Stars. The group stared at him and he immediately worried that giving them such a strange name might offend them, but to his surprise, Gaia responded enthusiastically, saying that it was a splendid name. The group became excited and started showing off their bodies proudly, thrilled by their new title, the Black Tri-Stars. Tasuku thanked them for their enthusiasm. After that, the group agreed to lend a hand in their efforts, and together they planned to build a grand house large enough for 10 people, clearing a section of the forest to the northeast of their home. While cutting the wood, Tasuku asked Belle about the favor she had mentioned earlier. She smiled and teased him for being curious, then decided to share a little secret. She had been planning to ask Gaia and the others for permission that after they passed away, she could use their fur to make clothing. Tasuku was bewildered and asked what she meant. Belle explained that it was their own idea. They wanted her to use their fur after death, which was why she had asked for Tasuku's opinion. Tasuku found the request extremely strange and asked if she had actually agreed to something like that. Belle replied casually that since it would only happen after their deaths, there was no harm in agreeing. She suggested they just leave it at that. Tasuku muttered that their idea of life and death was truly something else and decided not to dwell on it any further. He then called Belle over, saying he had something to discuss. She looked puzzled, but the construction of Gaia's group's house, designed with martial chants in mind, was soon completed. Since the wolves were the main occupants, most of the structure was dedicated to a large training room, along with living quarters and a kitchen. The bathroom was ingeniously built using the enormous cauldron the wolves had brought. The second floor contained the bedrooms and also offered access to the rooftop. Tasuku had initially thought the rooftop would simply serve as a place for drying laundry, but it turned out that striking heroic poses under the moonlight had become the wolves' nightly ritual. They finished the project by adding a well to the east side of the toilet, just behind the house. The next day, Tasuku received a new hoodie from Belle, who said it was made according to his own simple design. Tasuku admitted that he had been worried about venturing into the forest wearing only a shirt and shorts, but now the outfit felt perfect, all thanks to her. Belle replied that it was purely practical for now, but next time she would focus on crafting something with more style. After that, they headed to the wheat fields along with the wolves, who had offered to help Tasuku deal with the antlered deer problem. However, even after several rounds of replanting, the Haruka wheat continued to be destroyed again and again. They finally reached the field, and the wolves remarked that it was indeed a disaster and that they would definitely take care of the deer problem. Tasuku thought they were just showing off their muscles and wondered whether they were natural predators of deer or if they used some kind of special power to create ultra-effective traps. As the three wolves circled around the field, Tasuku noticed they were already on their fourth lap. Curious, he asked Belle what exactly they were doing. She replied that it was part of their method for dealing with the antlered deer problem. Tasuku was confused and asked if that could really be called a solution, since he couldn't understand what the three were doing. Belle laughed and explained that the wolves were spreading their scent around the field as they walked, a special scent that only animals could detect. The deer particularly disliked it and tended to stay away. Tasuku was surprised to learn this, realizing that since deer were herbivorous and wolves were carnivorous, the wolves' territorial scent naturally kept the deer from entering the area. Belle added that sometimes, despite this, a stubborn antlered deer might still wander in, but Tasuku shouldn't worry. When that happened, the wolves would handle it. The three wolves seemed thrilled by the idea, assuring Tasuku that he could leave everything to them and that they would easily take down 1 or 2 deer if they showed up. Then Gaia turned to Tasuku and asked whether he had ever considered raising livestock there instead. Tasuku agreed to the idea of raising livestock. Gaia said they would take full responsibility for taking care of them and added that for stable food production, Tasuku just needed to give it some thought. Ayah replied that she fully supported the introduction of livestock, explaining that hunting alone couldn't meet all their meat needs. Belle said that if they got sheep, they could also harvest wool, which sounded great to her. Elise mentioned that it would also be good to have milk for cooking. Gaia said that each of them could have a chicken and that he was considering either sheep or chickens as suitable additions. Tasuku wondered why it was limited to just those two. Gaia explained that both were rich in protein and low in fat. Tasuku felt they were really prioritizing muscle gains. Ayah mentioned that between the two, she would recommend chickens since they grew quickly and were great for food. She added that hunting wild chickens in the forest was actually a huge hassle. Gaia agreed, saying they had considered raising wild chickens before, but those were known as mandrake chickens in the forest and came with ecological issues. Tasuku remarked that the name alone sounded dangerous. Ayah said that when they screamed it was like a mandrake being uprooted, terrifying to hear. However, she added that their cries didn't carry far enough to kill anyone. Gaia agreed and mentioned that, at worst, their screams could rupture eardrums. Tasuku understood that wild chickens were unsuitable for farming and added that hunting became impossible during the winter, which was why they needed a steady supply of meat. He agreed, saying he loved egg dishes too and decided to start with chickens. Belle felt disappointed because it wasn't the sheep. They then spoke with Alfred about buying the chickens. It took around 3 days to prepare, and during that time they cleared the northwest area and built a chicken coop. When they entered the coop, Tasuku left the rest of the arrangements to Alfred. Alfred suggested starting immediately and opened a large bag, releasing 40 chickens in total. He had chosen the healthiest one for Tasuku. Tasuku thanked him, calling him a lifesaver. Ayah added that they could now enjoy fresh eggs regularly, and that raising chicks would also be important. Gaia mentioned that they could handle the responsibility as promised. Afterward, they stepped outside, where Alfred said it was impressive and hard to believe it had been done so quickly. He pointed out that only 3 days had passed since the livestock request and noted that Tasuku had really used magic to clear the forest. Tasuku replied that he often used his magic for building things like that, and realized he hadn't yet told Alfred about his construction and reconstruction abilities. Alfred commented that Tasuku truly seemed like an outsider, and, while talking, asked about their precautions against predators. Tasuku explained that he had wolves patrolling the entire area. Alfred clarified that he was asking not about corpses, but about protecting the chickens specifically. Ayah explained that since the forest was nearby, there were likely beasts that might attack the chickens. Just then, the black 3-star wolf pack appeared and assured them not to worry. They would guard the coop through the night. Tasuku was surprised and told them they needed proper rest at night. Gaia replied that since they were the ones who wanted to raise livestock, it was their duty to protect it as well. Tasuku pointed out that they were already helping with the farm work and that skipping rest would be bad for their muscles. He then turned to Alfred and asked if they could get something to protect the livestock. Alfred said it would be expensive, but suggested using dragon scale dust. He explained that it contained the essence of dragon scales and, when spread around the coop, would instinctively repel predators. It was highly effective. Tasuku was amazed that such a thing could help, but asked whether it would affect Gaia and his team. Alfred replied that it might have a slight effect on them. Tasuku felt uneasy about that, but the three wolves assured him that their muscles could handle a little dragon scent and that there would be no problem. Tasuku told them not to overdo it, warning that even if it worked for now, they might get hurt later and it wouldn't be worth it. They looked disappointed, so Tasuku turned to Alfred and asked if he had any other tools they could try. Alfred replied that he knew Tasuku would say something like that. Ayah was curious about what he meant and found Alfred's laugh rather creepy. Alfred told her that he had been keeping something from her and that in truth, he had another identity besides being a merchant. He said that it was the perfect time to reveal that he was recognized by the Continental Trap Association and was a certified trap master. Ayah asked what he was even talking about. Alfred wondered if she had never heard of the Continental Trap Association, which, according to him, boasted over 200 members. She replied that she had genuinely never heard of such a thing. Alfred said he couldn't believe that someone who had lived as long as she had didn't know about them. Ayah frowned and asked if he was trying to pick a fight with her. Tasuku then said he also wanted to know what the Continental Trap Association was. Alfred offered to explain it to Tasuku and asked Ayah to listen as well. He began his long explanation, and both Tasuku and Ayah looked increasingly annoyed as the lecture went on. Tasuku eventually asked what a certified meister was. Alfred replied that earning the certified title was similar to receiving an official qualification, and that only certified meisters were permitted to exhibit at the association's showcase. Tasuku wondered if that meant Alfred could also showcase his work at the events. Alfred agreed and said that he had participated the previous month under a circle named Glasses Dragon. Ayah thought that the name sounded ridiculous. Alfred went on to explain that the new trap he had presented had received good reviews, and now it was fine to use it. Tasuku tried to grasp the concept, but wondered since there were various types of traps, which one would be the best for them. Alfred asked him to slow down, saying he would explain everything carefully. He then took out a sheet and introduced the Glass Dragon's newest creation, Spring Breeze No. 1. Ayah scolded him, asking if he couldn't come up with a better name. Alfred responded that a flashy name wasn't always better, as simpler names resonated more with people. Tasuku told them to forget about the name and asked what the trap actually did. Alfred explained that it was a single-use disposable trap that activated when a pest stepped on its design. Once triggered, it created a whirlwind that tossed the pest into the air. Tasuku found it impressive, and Alfred added that the whirlwind could reach up to 30 meters high, so no pest could escape it. Tasuku kept thinking about it when Ayah asked what would happen if they accidentally stepped on it. Tasuku mentioned there was a safety mechanism. Alfred then said the next trap was different and that he was taking it back. Tasuku wondered if stepping on it would trigger it as well. He had a feeling from the beginning that things would turn out this way, and when he finally asked for a full explanation, he felt it had been a waste of time. Every trap he saw seemed too dangerous for his liking. Alfred grew angry, saying that those traps were meant to protect precious assets and that Tasuku needed such measures against pests. Tasuku questioned whether anyone would even use such dangerous devices and if they were actually sold at the showcases. Alfred seemed disappointed, admitting that it was difficult for traps refined to an artistic level to gain acceptance. Tasuku then understood that they wouldn't be able to sell any. Tasuku said that he didn't need anything so dangerous, as artistic traps weren't always practical. He asked Alfred if he had any simple fans or nets that were easier to use. Alfred replied that he did have electric fans, but they were just ordinary ones. Tasuku shouted that ordinary things would be perfectly fine and told him to show them. Alfred then demonstrated, explaining that it was simply a pole with electric currents running between them, and that it wasn't lethal. However, Tasuku pointed out that there was only one and felt disheartened after the long explanations. In the end, they decided to go with plain electric fans. Ayah and the others were already bored, lying down halfway through, and since Alfred's traps had been rejected, he looked rather dejected. It had been a truly exhausting day for Tasuku as well. The next day, Tasuku woke up thinking about checking on the vegetables and fruits. After Alfred had given them chickens, they now had a source of meat, but he knew they also needed vegetables for a balanced diet. That morning, Ayah came over and asked what he was doing outside. He told her he was planting seeds in the field. She called him a fool, pointing out that he couldn't just plant them like that, and asked why he hadn't turned them into seeds first. Tasuku realized he had forgotten, thinking that planting them directly would take forever to harvest. If he used his power to turn them into seeds, they would grow within 3 days. He began cutting and preparing the seeds, deciding to plant onions and potatoes in the expanded field before moving on to turning the fruit saplings into seeds. The fruits from the other side were meant to grow near the flat land that led toward the ocean, where he planned to create an orchard or perhaps a fruit garden. He continued inspecting the fruits and vegetables until Belle came over, asking about the warehouse and if she could use it. Elise then looked toward Tasuku and reminded him that he had mentioned needing rope for fish traps. She asked if she should go check on it. Tasuku agreed and apologized for the trouble, saying he would make the rope himself by repurposing bark, and told her to go ahead and use the linen. After they left, Tasuku thought about returning to the field to plant more seeds. He had the fruit seeds ready, but noticed that they had somehow fused into one. It confused him. Perhaps it happened while he was talking with them, or maybe using the word construct had caused the seeds to merge. He began to wonder what kind of seed it had become, whether it would grow into a fruit, a sweet root, or something entirely different. The thought excited him, though he also realized there might be some danger involved. The next morning, Elise woke him up with a cheerful greeting, saying breakfast was ready. She patted his head, mentioning that his bed head was showing. Tasuku thought that starting the morning like this felt wonderful. He wondered if this was what waking up as a newlywed felt like and thanked her, saying she really helped him a lot. Elise smiled and said she only did it because she wanted to, then left. Tasuku stretched his body, thinking that others might get the wrong idea, believing he was getting cozy with a cute elf early in the morning. Still, he couldn't help but smile. With Gaia's help, they had managed to deliver the goods to Alfred smoothly. They were also planning to expand the Haruka wheat field, along with the cotton and vegetable patches, building a boundary area between his home and Gaia's. There was also work involving harvesting crops and setting fish traps. The last few days had been so busy that he was completely exhausted, yet he managed to finish everything he needed to, all thanks to his companions. He truly felt grateful to have them with him. Later, while he was about to eat, Elise mentioned the kitchen, wondering if it would stay the same since it smelled like unusual soap. Tasuku apologized and asked if she could leave it as it was for a while. Ayah suspected that Tasuku might be up to something shady, but he denied it, saying it just needed more time to settle. Ayah muttered that soap should be used fresh and that she would never understand the ways of outsiders. Tasuku thought that the soap must be ready by now, and that it was finally time to execute his plan. He remembered how 2 days ago while fishing by the sea, he had shouted about craving Japanese food and wanted it so badly. A month had passed since Tasuku had arrived in that world, and during that time, he had never once found fault with Elise's cooking. Her ability to prepare gourmet-level meals using such limited ingredients continued to amaze him. However, there was still one issue that bothered him deeply. There was no rice in that world, nor any soy sauce or miso. While fishing one day, he felt a wave of sadness wash over him as he thought about how incomplete everything felt without proper Japanese cuisine. He longed for something that could capture that familiar taste. As he hoped for clams, a few suddenly appeared before him. The sight made him imagine grilling them over charcoal, adding a dash of soy sauce, and sipping the rich broth filled with umami flavor. He thought that the clams would make an excellent soup base, and that he could prepare a hot pot with vegetables and fish. Then, as his imagination went further, he began craving something bolder and heartier. He decided that ramen would be perfect, especially the kind served in ramen shops that specialized in clam-based salt ramen. He realized that since there was wheat available, making the noodles wouldn't be difficult. That evening, an idea struck him. He shared it with Elise and then stored away the prepared mixture in the kitchen for later use. Later, he pulled out a lump of dough and felt that its texture was just right. The noodles were made entirely from Haruka wheat. Since he didn't have the essential kansui required for proper ramen noodles, he improvised by using baking soda he had received from Alfred. Tasuku recalled the entire process of making the noodles and preparing the soup. He had used fresh vegetables and simmered the broth slowly over 2 days. When he finally tasted it, he found it incredibly delicious. For the toppings, he sautéed some wild boar meat with vegetables and added a boiled egg along with fish. When the soup was ready, he served it to everyone. Belle curiously asked what the dish was, and Tasuku explained that it was something from the world he had come from, known as ramen. Elise's eyes lit up with excitement as she commented that it looked similar to pasta. Tasuku wondered aloud if pasta existed in that world as well. Ayah then pointed at the 2 sticks he was holding and asked what they were. Tasuku told her that they were utensils used for eating, but if she found them difficult to use, she could simply stick with a fork and spoon. After that, Tasuku invited everyone to begin eating. As he took the first bite, he was pleasantly surprised. It far exceeded his expectations for a first attempt at making ramen. He was filled with happiness, and seeing his reaction, the others also took their first bites. To everyone's delight, it tasted wonderful. Tasuku told them how glad he was that they liked it, but admitted that making it often wouldn't be possible since it required a lot of salt. Elise smiled and remarked that there seemed to be many delicious foods in his world. Tasuku replied that the world he came from was passionate about food. Hearing that, Elise eagerly asked him to teach her more recipes from his homeland. Tasuku agreed with a smile, thinking that although his cravings for Japanese food hadn't completely disappeared, this ramen had satisfied them for now. He decided he would make it again occasionally, since everyone had enjoyed it so much. The 4 of them continued to eat together, enjoying their meal with warmth and laughter.